Chapter 1638. At this time, the command center had already contacted Yi Qian. The commanding officer's voice came through the earpiece. "Qing Yao, we already have the data analysis of your shooting. Now the command center has a big question to ask you, and we need you to answer it. According to the analysis, we found that the speed of each bullet was almost the same, and there was no pause in between." "Qing Yao, how did you do it?" So it was about that. Yi Qian thought about it and answered seriously. "It's not easy to explain directly. I can demonstrate it again. This way it'll be clearer." It was really not easy to explain. She couldn't tell the commanding officer that she was relying on her intuition like last time. In fact, she was relying on her intuition. However, a live demonstration would be more direct and would not leave too many doubts in people's hearts. When Uncle Chun found out that she could shoot like this, he was quite surprised. He thought it was an impossible but real miracle. Yes, Uncle Chun said it was a miracle that came from talent. She didn't know if it was a miracle, but every time she finished shooting, she had a very strong feeling. It was as if the gun was one with her, and the bullet was like an obedient child. She looked at the target, raised her hand, and aimed at the target, and the bullet could hit the target accurately. There was no way to explain it, only a live demonstration. The commanding officer was looking forward to it. The cold wind blew on his face like a knife, cutting into his skin. Yi Qian, who had entered the 5th combat zone, gently exhaled a breath of hot air to warm his fingers. Beside her, Li Jinyan looked back at her. "If you're cold, rub your hands." As a male soldier, he also felt the cold. His hands and feet were stiff from the cold. His joints felt like they were poured with rust, and there wasn't much flexibility. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the hunting operation was in full swing. Yi Qian raised his hands and rubbed his ears. He even gritted his teeth and put his hands under his collar to warm his hands with his body temperature. The temperature in the mountains was negative. If it wasn't negative 15 degrees Celsius, it would be negative 10 degrees Celsius. It couldn't be helped that the weather wasn't perfect. The members of the Storm Amphibious Frogman Assault Team, who were used to training by the sea, gritted their teeth and endured the cold wind head-on. The snow had stopped falling, but the north wind was still howling and blowing snow everywhere. Their line of sight was still a vast expanse of whiteness, which made it extremely difficult for reconnaissance work. After Li Jinyan finished his reconnaissance, he gestured to Yi Qian, and the two of them continued forward. On the other side, J5 said to Xia Jinyuan, "I'll leave Demon King Li to you, and I'll leave Qing Yao to you. Why did you assign 2 powerful characters to me? You think too highly of me, your brother." J5, who had already been captured once, felt that the pressure wasn't ordinary. Demon King Li was comparable to Q King, and Qing Yao's assassination skills weren't bad either. He really felt that he was the weakest of the 4. Xia Jinyuan, who was bent over, used his binoculars to observe the lake. His thin lips curved into a cold smile. "The more you're afraid, the more I want you to go. If you're captured, won't you get back at them?" A black shadow swept across the lake. Xia Jinyuan immediately put down his binoculars and contacted his brothers. "Team D, pay attention. The sentry is here. Be careful. Whoever becomes the first captive will run 20 kilometers with weights. Even if you have to die, you have to finish it." Chapter 1639. All the members of the Snowfield Brigade shuddered. Q King could be so ruthless that he could peel off a layer of skin. 20 kilometers was nothing. What mattered was how much weight they had to carry to complete the 20 kilometers. "Pigeon, White Crane, you two go lure the enemy." Xia Jinyuan lowered his voice and arranged for the battle. The two of them were good at fighting in the snow. As long as they were in a place with snow, they would be no different from fish in water. Only they would be able to discover the enemy. By arranging the two of them to lure the enemy, Xia Jinyuan wanted to start the captive plan. After the two of them left, Xia Jinyuan spread the battle map on the snow and looked at it. He frowned slightly. The 5th combat zone covered a huge area. Why did he feel that the command center was going to do something else? Only 2 teams were allowed to complete the hunt. Wasn't this a little too easy? I'm afraid the command center will do something else. We can't spread our forces out for the time being. After Xia Jinyuan made his judgment, he immediately switched to the public channel and whispered to all the members of the Snowfield Brigade, "Stay in a triangular formation and keep our forces concentrated. Don't rush to the other side of the lake." Then he said, "The Major General won't act until he sees the hare. The Commander of the Navy is the same. The 5th Combat Zone is so big that it's impossible for them to only arrange a simple hunt for both sides. Brothers, gather your forces together just in case." Just like the Storm Commandos, they also completed the hunt in groups of 2. No one stood still and waited for the enemy to come to them. Everyone was moving and completing the hunt in their own way. Li Jinyan was also spreading the battle map on the ground. His fingers, wearing combat gloves, moved across the entire 5th Combat Zone. Finally, he asked Yiqian, "Do you feel that this hunt is too simple?" It was so simple that it didn't seem like the commander style. Yiqian didn't know how to answer this question. This was her first time participating in a competition like this. She shook her head and answered truthfully, "Sorry, this is my first time participating in a competition like this. I'm not too familiar with the combat styles of the 2 leaders of the command center, so I can't give you any advice. It's a little too simple. The commander style is to be more aggressive towards the end. Now it's a bit like boiling a frog in warm water." After Li Jinyan finished speaking, he contacted the whole team. "Gather the troops. Big Eel, stop luring the enemy." Fighting in the snow was the weakness of the Storm Commandos. They were much more cautious than the Snowfield Brigade. Looking at the red and green dots representing the 2 armies suddenly slowing down, the Marine commander sighed a few times. These 2 guys are really a bit difficult to deal with. "It's done, old dog. It's about time. Just tell them the battle requirements." Major General Liu saw the look of pity on his face and could not help but shake his head and laugh. "A simple hunting operation is too simple. According to our training style in the past, they will definitely figure it out." Just as the members of the 2 teams were guessing that the command center might have further instructions, the latest instructions came from the command center. There was a final position in the 5th Combat Zone. Whoever could enter the final position first and finish off the 2 platoons would be considered the end of the competition. After receiving this order, the commanders of the 2 teams were not surprised at all. Instead, they let out a long sigh of relief. The final position was not in this area at all. There would be an intersection point when they were heading towards the final position. This intersection point was where the 2 teams would first exchange fire. Chapter 1640. Without further ado, the commanders of the 2 teams quickly adjusted their battle strategy. Xia Jinyuan immediately called back the white crane and pigeon, while Li Jinyan immediately stopped the baiting tactic and led his team to the final location. The final location was surrounded by barbed wire, and the wire was connected with high-voltage electricity. Other than the members of the Storm Assault Team and the Snowfield Brigade, no one else could enter. There were a few wooden huts inside. These wooden huts were used by the forest police to rest at night when they were patrolling the mountains. Now, they had been taken over as a base that needed to be taken down by the Snowfield Brigade and the Storm Assault Team. There were 2 platoons of soldiers inside the base and 2 platoons outside. Each platoon had 30 soldiers, so there were 4 platoons inside and outside the base. A total of 120 targets needed to be taken care of. The 2 teams needed to take care of the soldiers guarding the base before they faced each other. At this time, both teams were tired and hungry. At the same time, their physical strength was severely depleted. The command center did not give them much time to rest in order to better understand each team's combat ability. The 5-day competition had to end by 6 p.m. the next day. If both teams failed to take down the base, both teams would lose. The temperature inside the wooden hut was slightly better than outside, but the north wind still came in through the gaps in the wooden hut. A sentry pushed open the wooden door and walked over. He patted the snow off his body and walked to his platoon leader. "Platoon leader, let's just keep watch for tonight." They had been on guard for 3 days, but they still had not seen the so-called special forces. "Tonight is about right. Stay alert tonight. Don't let anyone sneak up behind you and slit your throat." The platoon leader had been keeping a close eye on his soldiers for the past few days. It was fine during the day, but he was afraid that someone would sneak up on them at night. This time, he brought his soldiers here to broaden their horizons and see how the special forces kill the other special forces. It was really lucky for their platoon to have such an opportunity. Outside the wooden hut, the snowy wind had not stopped blowing. The wind blew into the hut and made the raincoat flap noisily. The platoon leader could not help but stand up and look outside. With such a strong wind, the snow should stop at night. When the snowy wind blew on his face, it was like someone had slapped him. It was painful and itchy. In the end, even his nose was so stiff that he could no longer feel it. Other than Li Jinyan, who was slightly paler, the rest of the water ghosts were all dark. Even if their noses were frozen like carrots, it was not very obvious. Yi Qian was different. When she stood among the water ghosts, she was like a white swan mixed among black swans. Right now, her nose was the most obvious red. Li Jinyan couldn't help but want to laugh a few times when he talked to her, but he restrained himself very well. Yi Qian, who didn't feel cold even after walking for so long, couldn't help but cover his nose. His gloved fingers lightly touched the tip of his nose. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He seemed to have lost his senses. He was so cold that he felt like he was touching someone else's nose. Don't touch it, don't rub it. Go back and take a scalded radish. It'll be fine. Li Jinyan couldn't help but remind him in a low voice. He reached out his hand. They were climbing up the mountain path. The snow was too thick, so they had to help each other. Yi Qian reached out and grabbed it tightly. He pulled his feet out of the snow and walked up with shallow and deep steps. The female soldier's hands were very small. They were obviously different from the hands of the male soldiers. Sometimes, Li Jinyan even wondered if he would break the bones in her hand if he used a little more strength. She was the only female soldier in the two teams. Facing such a harsh environment, she didn't complain at all. This was indeed admirable. Chapter 1641. After climbing up the slope, Li Jinyan immediately let go of his hand. Then, he gestured to Yi Qian to crawl while he pushed aside a shrub covered in snow and slowly crouched down. According to the analysis of the battle map, the first exchange of fire between the two teams was less than 300 meters away from them. Li Jinyan used the snow and shrubs as cover and carefully used his binoculars to observe the situation in front of them. The mountain was quiet and everything was silent. Occasionally, snow would fall from the trees, making a dull thud. In the blink of an eye, everything would return to normal. Yi Qian, who had crouched down beside him, said softly, "Q King will not let go of the opportunity to kill our forces. If he arrived before us, he would have already set up an ambush and waited for us to fall into his trap." The binoculars only saw a white world. There was nothing out of the ordinary. However, the more there was nothing out of the ordinary, the more it meant that something was wrong. Li Jinyan lowered his head and slowly moved his body so that he was completely hidden behind the shrubs. He crawled side by side with Yi Qian. That's normal. If it were me, I would not let go of the opportunity to destroy the enemy's forces as soon as I occupy them. Turning on the communicator, Li Jinyan contacted the team members behind him. Move forward in a dragnet formation. Each team will maintain a distance of 10 meters from each other. Deshao, 5 of your teams will head to the final stronghold. 5 of our teams will stay behind. 2 scouts will stay put. Then, he said to Yi Qian, "You go with the scouts. Stay 1 step behind Deshao and the others." At this time, Qing Yao was the focus of the entire team. How could Q King allow a Qing Yao, who was familiar with their team, to stay behind? Their first target was definitely Qing Yao. Yi Qian also knew why this was the arrangement, but she also had her own thoughts. Since they had already been targeted, avoiding them was not a solution. Moreover, she did not have the habit of avoiding them. On the battlefield, offense was always the best defense. Yi Qian sighed softly and expressed his opinion. "Since it's a hunting operation, Demon King, I don't intend to avoid it. Let's face it directly." She rarely expressed her opinion when he was carrying out orders. Now that she had spoken, it was enough to show that she had thought it through carefully. Li Jinyan pursed his thin lips slightly. After a few seconds of pause, he said, "If you're not worried about being captured, you can continue to follow me." Previously, They had captured a member of the Snowfield Brigade. In this hunting operation, the other party would definitely want to get back at them. Qing Yao was undoubtedly their target. Yi Qian did not hesitate. He chose to take action. On the snow, a few sparrows were jumping around happily. Their light bodies became the only vivid scenery in the snow, leaving a string of small paw prints. Xia Jinyuan used a tree branch to pick out the snow stuck to the bottom of his boots so that it would be easier for him to take action later. Q King, there's a situation. Bai's voice came through the earpiece. It was low and contained a hint of excitement. There's movement. We didn't wait for half an hour in vain. The Snowfield Brigade had arrived at the first crossfire half an hour ago and had set up an ambush. J5, I'll leave Qing Yao to you. Xia Jinyuan threw the tree branch lightly into the bushes. The military target swept through the bushes, and the snow fell quietly to cover up his tracks. A few camouflaged figures flitted through the pure white world. They were as light as birds flying in the snow and disappeared silently. Yi Qian, who was leaning against the tree trunk behind her, panted lightly. He turned on the communicator to contact his team members. It's about 5 minutes. It's about time to start. Bai He and Dove were scouts. Xia Jinyuan had told her that as long as they were in the snow, they would be like fish in water. It would not be easy for her to slip past under their noses. Chapter 1642. The Snowfield Brigade's target was her, and her goal was to finish off either white crane or pigeon. She did not have that much confidence in finishing off both of them at once. Li Jinyan was about 5 meters away from Yi Qian. He had already readied his combat dagger and was just waiting for the Snowfield Brigade members to arrive before he could make his move. The wind carried snow with it and blew against his goggles, blocking his vision. White Crane, who was wearing a white camouflage suit, moved carefully. His military boots did not make any sound when he stepped into the snow. He was mainly responsible for scouting and reporting everything he saw to his comrades, so that they could carry out their mission. There are no abnormalities ahead. Brothers, be careful of traps. White Crane carefully passed through the crossfire and hid behind a tree. From afar, his figure seemed to blend into the white world. Push left and avoid the point of abnormalities. As a scout, White Crane had entered the range of the Storm Commandos. His main mission was to infiltrate the enemy's rear and scout their military movements. He also had to capture enemy captives to obtain information that would be beneficial to their side. White Crane and Pigeon did not directly hunt their targets. They only needed to provide useful information to their comrades and scout the enemy's movements. Therefore, they did not have any offensive missions. On the contrary, they had to avoid running into the Storm Commandos. Therefore, White Crane and Pigeon had to be more careful and cautious than any other member to avoid being discovered by the Storm Commandos. Li Jinyan agreed to let Yi Qian directly participate in the hunting operation. At the same time, he assigned Yi Qian the mission to kill or capture a scout from the Snowfield Brigade. After some observation, he realized that Yi Qian's anti-reconnaissance ability was quite good. Just like her shooting skills, they were on par. Xia Jinyuan predicted that Yi Qian would definitely participate in the hunting operation, but he could not have predicted how Li Jinyan would arrange for Yi Qian. He also did not expect that Yi Qian would have his eyes on the scout he sent out, White Crane. The mountain was very quiet, but the atmosphere was somber. The sparrows that flew into the snow from time to play seemed to have sensed something and flew away from the forest. Yi Qian narrowed her eyes and stared at a white figure. She gave her position to Li Jinyan and said in a voice so low that it was almost inaudible, "I found the target. He's about 3 meters away from me. Cooperate with me." "Got it." Li Jinyan and the other water ghosts who were closer to him answered through his earpiece. The three of them would set up an ambush, while Li Jinyan would go deep to lure the enemy and fully cooperate with Yi Qian to complete the hunt. At this time, the sky had gradually darkened. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, and the painful cold wind that blew against his face was even stronger than before. His body temperature seemed to have dropped slightly. Yi Qian, who had become one with the snow, was silently waiting for the right moment. She was completely buried in the snow. In the gradually darkening sky, as long as she remained motionless, no one would know that the slightly arched snow bump in the distance was actually Yi Qian in disguise. At least, White Crane did not discover it. However, he was very cautious. After entering the Storm Commando's range, he would lurk and observe every meter he walked. 10 meters, 9 meters, 8 meters, 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter. The target was getting closer. Yi Jianping held her breath and listened to the army boots stepping on the snow softly. She heard the squeaking sound of the snow being crushed. White Crane passed by her, less than 50 centimeters away. Yi Qian did not move. For the time being, she could not confirm whether there was someone behind White Crane. She had to wait for Li Jinyan and the others to send news. Chapter 1643. Her target was the Snowfield Brigade scouts, while Li Jinyan's target was Xia Jinyuan. She thought that Xia Jinyuan's target would definitely be Li Jinyan as well. King against king, there would definitely be a decisive battle. Suddenly, the sound of fighting came from behind. Yi Qian felt a chill run down his spine. The Storm Commandos had been outflanked from behind. Even though Yi Qian knew that he was being outflanked from behind, he still maintained his current posture, so that Bai He, who was less than a meter away from him, did not notice him at all. She even held her breath as she heard Bai He say, 5 meters away from me. Target spotted at 7 o'clock. K7, surround him. T6, you'll be the vanguard. Bai He quickly pinpointed his position and informed his comrades behind him to move quickly. When Yi Qian heard this, he knew that the Storm Commandos had all entered the Snowfield Brigade's ambush range. Just as Li Jinyan had said, the Snowfield Brigade would definitely not miss an opportunity to strangle their targets. This was a frontline unit that was good at ambushing and assassinating. They would only attack and would never stay in their original positions. The figures of 2 Snowfield Brigade members entered the line of sight of Li Jinyan and the other 2 water demons. Following the order to move came from the communicator. Yi Qian leaped out from the snow like a hidden snow leopard, flashing his sharp claws at the prey he had locked onto. Right at this moment, Bai He received a cold order from Xia Jinyuan. Bai He, retreat. There was no time to explain, and Xia Jinyuan ordered Bai He to retreat immediately. But it was too late. Hearing his captain's order through his earpiece, Bai He felt a murderous aura coming from behind him, causing him to quickly leap forward and narrowly avoid the murderous aura coming from behind him. He turned around and saw clearly who the person who had ambushed him was. J5, where did you run off to? Qing Niao has her eyes on me. When Bai He saw that it was Yi Qian, he immediately felt that something bad was about to happen. He had never seen Qing Niao's strength before, but after working with her once, he felt that she was unfathomable. J5, who was about to stuff a ball of snow into his mouth to quench his thirst, choked violently. He contacted Xia Jinyuan, who was far away from him, and said, Qing Niao targeted Bai He. She's really ruthless. She directly gouged out our eyes. Let's take a gamble and see if Bai He kills Qing Niao or if Qing Niao kills Bai He. Seeing that his comrade was still in the mood to take a gamble, Xia Jinyuan raised his thin lips and said with a faint smile, as an instructor, if you get captured a second time, J5, you won't be able to escape a 20-page self-reflection. J5's body shook violently. Although he was an instructor, he was also afraid of writing reports. When he had applied for a transfer, one of the reasons was that he was not good at writing reports. If he was captured again, he would slap himself 50 times, stall the devil for at least half an hour. Xia Jinyuan approached Bai He with his rifle. The devil had ordered Qing Niao to kill his scouts, which gave him the opportunity to capture Qing Niao. J5 did not stay any longer and immediately went to stall the devil. He knew that Q King wanted to kill or capture Qing Niao first. How could Yi Qian be so stupid as to wait for the Snowfield Brigade to come to Bai He's aid and kill her while they were at it? After her first failed sneak attack, she pounced on Bai He again. She came with the wind and snow, carrying a murderous aura, and directly blocked Bai He's path. At this moment, Bai He finally understood why K7 and the others said that Yi Qian was a natural-born soldier. It was because the murderous aura around her was enough to frighten her enemies. Chapter 1644. Bai He knew that his comrades would come to support him, because Q King's goal was to capture Qing Niao. Even though he didn't quite understand why he insisted on capturing Qing Niao as the captive, he would definitely fully support Q King's decision. Even if this was an elimination round, he would still support Q King's decision unconditionally. So Yi Qian wanted to end the battle quickly, while Bai He wanted to stall for time and wait for his comrades to arrive. Qing Niao, are you sure you can beat me? As a special forces soldier who had undergone professional and systematic training, Bai He knew very well how to communicate to buy time for himself, and how to stall for time without leaving a trace. After dodging Yi Qian's sneak attack, he revealed his location to all his comrades nearby. That way, whoever was closest to him would be able to rush over immediately. However, Yi Qian wasn't going to give him the chance. The two of them were already facing off against each other. Instead of ending the battle quickly, he was still in the mood to chat with her. Yi Qian immediately knew what Bai He wanted to do. You want to capture me? I'm sorry, Bai He, but I really don't want to become a captive. Yi Qian smiled at him. The unsharpened combat dagger in his hand flashed through the snowy wind. The dark sky couldn't hide the cold gleam of the dagger as it flashed through the air. The lightly armed Yi Qian made his move once again. Combat was something every member of the Snowfield Brigade had to pass. Even though Yi Qian wasn't officially a member of the Snowfield Brigade, her combat skills weren't bad. Against Bai He or any other member of the Snowfield Brigade, Yi Qian wouldn't be afraid. This was a competition, but it was also a war. As for her, how could she be afraid when she was on the battlefield? Soldiers were already on the battlefield, and horns were blown on the battlefield. The cruel flames of war didn't allow you to be afraid, and it didn't allow you to even think about retreating. Why was there a need for such harsh training? It was so that when you went to the battlefield to protect your country, you could return safely and become a member of the family reunion. During the hunting operation, as long as the two parties were facing each other head-on, guns and ammunition were not allowed within 3 meters of each other. Empty bullets would still hurt people if fired within 3 meters. In a short distance, the only tools you can use are your own hands and the unsharpened dagger in your hand. This is the best weapon you can use to defeat your opponent. Bai He was shocked by Yi Qian's ferocious and almost cruel attacks. She actually chose to fight him in close combat alone, without the support of the water ghosts. This was not a simple fight. This was a fight with their lives on the line. There were no elegant movements, only strength and ferocity. Yi Qian relied on his agility to close in on Bai He at the fastest speed possible. The dagger in his hand went straight for Bai He's chest. Bai He, who had been a scout, came from a scholarly family. All the girls he had come into contact with since he was young were gentle and delicate. Even though he knew that as a soldier, Yi Qian was different from those girls, when he faced Yi Qian alone, he was still shocked by her fierce and cold eyes and extremely bloody movements. Yi Qian kicked the snow hard with her military boots. Large chunks of snow flew towards Yi Qian. When something flew toward the person, no matter how light or heavy it was, the body's most realistic reaction would always be to dodge it out of reflex. Chapter 1645. Bai He wanted to make use of Yi Qian's few seconds of dodging to make himself the attacker. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Yi Qian was not a female soldier who acted according to common sense. She did not dodge at all. Instead, she chose a more direct way to fight head-on. The snowflakes hit her shoulder. Even though she was wearing thick winter clothing, her shoulder still hurt. However, this did not force Yi Qian to stop. She was still fearless in her attacks. She knew that if she did not finish off Bai He quickly, the Snowfield Brigade would come to her aid. By then, she would be surrounded and would have nowhere to run. Yi Qian, who had lived 2 lives, knew how to give up and take. At this moment, she had to give it her all and bear the pain. Only then would she be able to take the ending she wanted. Only the winner would have the right to continue fighting. Yi Qian's abdomen, shoulders, calves, and arms were all hit by Bai He's fists and military boots. Men were always stronger than women. When the kicks landed on her body, Yi Qian felt like her bones were about to crack. She grabbed Bai He's wrist with one hand and punched his armpit directly. Her right leg kicked Bai He's knee. She did not show any mercy. Similarly, Bai He did not show any mercy. Both of them used all their strength to beat the other to the ground. The two of them fought in close combat. Yi Qian was not as strong as the male soldier, but she was very good at making use of her strengths and agility to make up for her weaknesses. She disrupted Bai He's defense. There were no fancy moves in the Special Forces combat. All of their moves were based on speed, accuracy, and ruthlessness. They strived to finish off their opponent as quickly as possible. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." Xia Jinyuan's low and steady voice came through Bai He's earpiece. He needed to avoid the water ghost from the Storm Commandos and avoid fighting with Li Jinyan. Therefore, he could not arrive immediately. Bai He did not answer. He was frightened by Yi Qian's actions. "Qing Niao!" he shouted, trying to stop Yi Qian from harming himself. When Xia Jinyuan heard this, his expression darkened. Bai He's shout was filled with worry. He was trying to stop Yi Qian. Why was he trying to stop Yi Qian? What's going on? Xia Jinyuan, who was supposed to take 5 minutes to get there, arrived a minute earlier. He saw a figure lying in the white snow and walked over with a gloomy expression. Bai He, who was lying in the snow, looked at his comrade who had appeared above him. The corner of his mouth was bleeding from Yi Qian's punch. He let out a long sigh and said, "You're a heroine. You're so cruel to yourself." "Huh." Xia Jinyuan chuckled and looked at his comrade coldly. "You've lost to Qing Miao twice. Bai He, you need to be sent back to the village to train." Bai He, who was originally lying down, suddenly had a drastic change in expression. He stood up like a carp. Q King was definitely not joking with him. Although he was a person who loved a joke, he would never make such a joke. That's right. Qing Miao is a heroine. She's so cruel to herself. That's because she knows when to be cruel to herself and her enemies. Xia Jinyuan's voice turned cold. "And you, not only can you not be cruel to yourself, you can't even be cruel to our enemies. Bai He, since when did the Snowfield Brigade need a group of Special Forces soldiers who show off their benevolence on the battlefield?" Chapter 1646. He was happy that Yi Qian had managed to escape, but he was also disappointed that his comrade had died in battle. If his comrade had tried his best and failed, he would have laughed and said, "Don't think that female soldiers are easy to deal with." However, it was obvious that his comrade was not good enough, but had committed a grave mistake. It was true that they were familiar with Qing Niao, but at this moment, Qing Niao belonged to the Storm Commandos. In this competition, she was standing opposite of them. Faced with the young captain's criticism, Bai He did not refute and accepted it humbly. After Xia Jinyuan finished criticizing him coldly, Bai He reflected on himself seriously. "I will accept any punishment. I will always remember today's mistake. I will never make a similar mistake again." A mistake was a mistake, and there was no excuse for it. After the scolding, Xia Jinyuan looked at the row of footprints that disappeared into the depths of the forest. He couldn't help but smile and turned to ask his comrade calmly, "What did Qing Yao do just now?" I grabbed her shoulder, and when the dagger was about to touch her neck, she actually sent her own neck towards the dagger. Although the dagger wasn't sharpened, the force of her collision was quite strong. I was shocked and I shouted. Naturally, my hand movements slowed down. Bai He still had a lingering fear when he mentioned what had just happened. He sighed deeply and said, "She was too ruthless. She was so ruthless that it scared me." When Xia Jinyuan heard this, he was not frightened at all. Instead, he laughed. If she hadn't been ruthless, she might have been the one to die. Xia Jinyuan admired his girlfriend's dangerous behavior. His little fox was indeed smart to fight back from the brink of death. But she was too smart. Bai He seemed to want to say something, but Xia Jinyuan did not listen. It would be against the rules if he continued to talk about the same comrade who had died. After successfully escaping, Yi Qian hid well and sent his location to Li Jinyan. He adjusted his breathing while waiting for Li Jinyan to meet up with him. There would be no more hunting at the first crossfire because both sides knew that the other side was active in this area. In order to seize the last position, they would not waste any more time and would choose to move forward. For the time being, Li Jinyin didn't ask Yi Jian how she managed to get rid of the scouts from the Shuiyu Brigade. He entered the public channel and told all the members of the Storm Commandos the news. Instantly, the sound of fingers snapping could be heard from his earpiece as a sign of praise. Killing one of the enemy's scouts in one move was really good news. When the J5 of the Shuiyu Brigade couldn't contact White Crane, he knew that something was going to happen. When Xia Jinyuan told them that White Crane was dead and the one who killed him was none other than Greenbird, they all held their breaths. Was killed by a bullet? If he was killed by a bullet, it wouldn't be a shame. G3 said. Everyone knew how fast Qing Miao could shoot. No one in the team could compare to her. It would be great if he was really killed by a bullet, but unfortunately he was not. He was killed by close combat. The cold reality was said by Xia Jinyuan calmly. His comrades all sucked in a breath of cold air. He smiled lightly and said, "The target of the capture plan has not changed. Last time, she killed Pigeon and Bai He with a sniper rifle. This time, she continued to kill Bai He. Brothers, you have to bring Qing Yao to me." K7 and G3 were together. Hearing this, the two of them quickly looked at each other. Q King really did not want to show mercy. Since that was the case, they could not show mercy either. They had to capture Qing Yao whenever they saw her. It did not matter if they knew her or not. Chapter 1647. K7 was a forensic doctor and had always been calm. He turned off the communicator and said to G3, "Q King wants to use this competition to train Qing Yao's individual combat experience. It seems like he is determined to send Qing Yao to the Snowfield Brigade. That was his plan from the very beginning. Do you think he was just casually talking about it in the past?" G3 wasn't surprised. They already knew about Q King's plan from the Southern Province Cooperation. Not only does Q King have this plan, but the military and Major General also have this plan. Otherwise, why would they drag Qing Yao to train with us from time to time? It wasn't that he was joking, but it felt like... After a moment of silence, K7 said, "Their requirements for Qing Yao are too strict. It feels like they have more long-term plans." "Do they?" G3 thought about it and didn't feel anything strange. He said, "Qing Yao will be our comrade in the future. It's good that she's being trained by us now. Q King probably feels that her ability has reached a bottleneck and needs to break through. If he really had to feel something, the only thing he felt was that Qing Yao's overall ability had reached a bottleneck. Only by breaking through this bottleneck could she reach Q King's requirements and the Major General's requirements. But then again, Qing Yao's individual combat ability was already strong enough. She had already reached the requirements to join the Snowfield Brigade. Q King did seem to have some long-term plans. No matter what they have planned, we will cooperate fully." G3 didn't think too much about it. He said calmly, "Q King will communicate with the military at any time. The military and Major General will also tell Q King about their plans. We will know when the time comes. Right now, I should think about how to capture Qing Yao. If I fail the first time, I won't be able to do it a second time. The Demon King is not easy to deal with, and the Qing Yao is not easy to deal with. Once the two of them come together, it will be even more difficult." G3 directly analyzed the situation. At the same time, he turned on his communicator and said to Xia Jinyuan, "Killing a White Crane is the Demon King's warning to us. We should return the favor to the Demon King." Xia Jinyuan liked to hear that. He smiled elegantly and dangerously. "That's right. It's 5:27 in the evening now. Let's try to give the devil a big gift before 8 o'clock. Agreed. Agreed. I have no objections." The comrades of the Snowfield Brigade nearby expressed their opinions one after another. Xia Jinyuan, who was walking in the snow, put on a fake smile and said, "Remember, Qing Yao is now our opponent, not someone we know. Whoever tries to be merciful to me will have to go back and clean the toilets." His white teeth reflected the cold light of the snow, making him look like a wolf out on a snowy night. He exuded a ferocious aura. T6 secretly clicked his tongue when he heard that. He said to Z7, "You still want to be merciful to her?" Q King won't be happy about that. Looks like when we see Qing Yao later, the two of us will have to come up with a plan to kill her. I like to see a captive. Brothers, don't be too barbaric. Go easy on her, especially that signal device of hers. T6, who was still thinking about how to eliminate Yi Qian in one go, froze when he heard that. He rubbed the tip of his frozen nose and felt that this mission was quite difficult. No one knew what kind of expression Xia Jinyuan had when he spoke. It could also be said that he was expressionless. The elegant man was as cold as ice, without a trace of human warmth. Even his dark eyes, which usually looked at Yi Qian gently like water, were frozen. Chapter 1648. Little Fox, you have to be prepared. If you want to join the Snowfield Brigade, I have to tell you that it's not an easy task. You won't be so lucky in a real war, and no one will show you mercy just because they know you. You won against Bai He this time purely because you used petty tricks, and it just so happens that on the battlefield, petty tricks can cost you your life at any time. If you want to complete the mission perfectly and come back alive, you have to rely on your accumulated combat experience. Xia Jinyuan was indeed happy that Yi Qian had escaped from the first hunt, but he wasn't just happy. He also calmly analyzed Yi Qian's combat style and accurately found Yi Qian's weaknesses so that she could correct them. He couldn't accept hearing the news of her death one day, so he would rather be harsh on her now and train her in every possible way than let her join the Snowfield Brigade in the future and make himself afraid. Fighting alone on the battlefield was many times more dangerous than the previous missions they had carried out together. How could petty tricks save her life? The White Crane's ability was not bad, and it could definitely stall Yi Jian for 5 minutes. Yi Jian must have heard his order and decided to do this in order to leave as soon as possible. She was betting that the White Crane might panic because of her actions. She gambled correctly. Bai He did panic, so Bai He died and she escaped. She won because Bai He knew her, but what would happen on the battlefield? Maybe she wouldn't do it, but now that she did, he had to teach her a lesson. On the battlefield, she didn't recognize anyone, and this lesson would be unforgettable. Xia Jinyuan could treat Yi Qian very, very well, but when it came to training and future combat, even the most gentle man would be incorruptible and ruthless. At this time, Yi Qian was already reflecting on his actions. Li Jinyan's cold expression made Yi Qian realize why he was given the nickname Devil King. It was very cold, and the air pressure was very, very low. Every cell and every pore was emitting an aura that made one's hair stand on end. The gaze that swept over was like a small knife. As long as one was swept by such a gaze, it would hurt as if one's flesh was being cut. This was physical pain. The most terrifying thing was the spiritual pressure. One couldn't even raise one's head and could only stand in front of him in fear. It was as if one was being sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts. Are you joking about the war? After an unknown amount of time, Li Jinyan finally spoke. It made Yi Qian, who had lived 2 lives, shudder violently. Actually, when Li Jinyan asked her how to get rid of Bai He, she had already realized that she had made a big mistake. She thought that she was smart, but it was a mistake that was taboo on the battlefield. If you really were on the battlefield, would the enemy stop you from harming yourself? Of course not. It would only make it easier for him to send his knife to your neck. He definitely wouldn't stop you or even avoid you because he knew you. Yi Qian didn't raise her head. She was wrong, but there was no need to lower her head to admit her mistake. This would break the character of a soldier. No, she replied bluntly. She didn't try to explain herself. There was nothing she could say to defend herself. When she made a big mistake, she could only correct it. Li Jinyan didn't fly into a rage, nor did he mock and ridicule her. He only said calmly in a cold tone, "Qing Yao, you really aren't afraid of death by sending your neck to the enemy's knife." Chapter 1649. The more it was like this, the more Yi Qian felt that this was the calm before the storm. A soldier is not afraid of death and has the spirit of sacrifice. This is right. Unfortunately, you only thought about how to die, but not how to solve the problem. Qing Yao, is this your combat ability? Li Jinyan was not angry, but his expression was much colder than usual. Qing Yao was a soldier now. Her mistake was because he did not teach her well. She made a mistake, and, as her captain, he was also at fault. Yi Qian pursed her lips and answered seriously. I made a big mistake. I did not protect myself well, and instead put my life in the hands of others. I thought that they knew me and would not really hurt me. On a real battlefield, what I did just now was suicide. Not only was I rushing to my death, but I also implicated my comrades behind me. Snow drifted into Yi Qian's eyes, and the cold sensation stimulated her tense heartstrings. She could feel the evil aura coming from the Demon King, and she could not help but shiver. This was the Demon King that all the Storm Commandos feared and respected. It was as if a king had descended. His tone was calm, but all you could feel was a bone-chilling evil aura. Very good. Li Jinyan only said these 2 words after listening to her, and then he walked away. Yi Qian, who was standing in the snow, was slightly stunned. Very good? What was very good? She said very good? Impossible. Then why was it very good? Yi Qian, who had just taken a few steps, suddenly stopped. She understood why he said very good. Very good. Committing a crime knowingly was an additional crime. That was what he meant when he said very good. Yi Qian, who had never made a big mistake in this life, knew that she had finally made a big mistake today. This time, she fell so hard that her nose was bruised and her face was swollen. Not only would she be taught a lesson by Demon King Li, but also Xia Jinyuan and the Navy commander, Major General of the Army, and maybe even the military. She would pay the price for her mistake. For a moment, even the usually calm Yi Qian felt gloomy. His expression was as cold as ice. She was terribly wrong, ridiculously wrong. However, there was no medicine for regret. The only thing he could do was to never make the same mistake again. At the same time, he had to use his true strength to defeat his opponent. By this time, the wind and snow in the mountains had stopped. Yi Qian, who had been following closely behind him, let out a low sigh that reached Li Jinyan's ears. The corners of his mouth involuntarily tightened. This kind of mistake actually represented a mistake that occurred when things went too smoothly. Thinking of her personal resume, it had to be said that she had indeed gone too smoothly, so much so that she had made a big mistake. He had to make her realize her mistake. She believed that Xia Jinyuan would not sit back and do nothing. He would definitely make a big move to teach her a lesson. Whether it was the drill, the competition, or the field training, she would always remember that there were no acquaintances on the battlefield, only enemies who would fight to the death. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the sky in the mountains had already dimmed. Only the light from the snow illuminated the contours of the mountains. At this time, the wind and snow had stopped. Walking in the mountains, the visibility was even better than during the day. At this time, the night vision goggles were still not working. Stepping on the soft snow, Yi Qian slowly squatted down. He made a hand gesture to Li Jinyan beside him, telling him to stay down. There was a situation. This place was very close to the final position. Chapter 1650. Following Yi Qian's hand signal, Li Jinyan quickly lowered his body. When he saw Yi Qian's hand signal, he immediately informed his comrades around him. There are 4 people in front. Everyone take cover. The members of the Storm Commandos, whose bodies reacted faster than their brains, were all very agile. They found a good spot to take cover. After a series of rustling sounds, there was complete silence. Li Jinyan, who was crouching, quietly lay beside Yi Qian. His gaze fell on the 4 people about 13 meters away. They're not from the Snowfield Brigade. Yi Qian's head tilted slightly to his side. It was just right at Li Jinyan's shoulder. He could hear it clearly while maintaining a certain distance. They should be the soldiers stationed at the final position. Li Jinyan nodded slightly. They were not far from the final position. These people should be patrolling soldiers. Big Squiddo, contact Big Mermaid. Li Jinyan, who was in hiding, asked Big Squiddo, who was in charge of communications, to contact Big Mermaid's team. He needed to know if their team had successfully infiltrated the final position. In less than 2 minutes, Big Mermaid's low voice came through. They have successfully infiltrated the eastern position. There are about 3 to 4 platoons of soldiers. Demon King, I suspect that the command center is inside the final position. As long as they entered the position, Li Jinyin did not have the intention to touch the command center for the time being. However, just in case, he still had to pay attention. He said, confirm the location of the command center and send people to keep an eye on it. The Snowfield Brigade is very likely to infiltrate. Once you encounter them, engage them immediately. Guard the perimeter to prevent any sneak attacks. Li Jinyin, who had not yet entered the final position, did not hesitate at all. He immediately deployed to deal with any problems that might arise. Tonight was a big battle. It was also the climax of the entire competition. It was not impossible for the command center to be located at the final position. It would depend on which team found the location of the command center first. The scout's voice came through the earpiece. There are electronic eyes and infrared sensors. I'll remove the infrared to deal with the alarm. I'll leave the electronic eyes. I'll give you the location. Brothers, stay away. The infrared sensor was just a sensor. Their camouflage uniforms were all coated with a new type of anti-infrared coating called maleic anhydride. To them, this thing was just a decoration. However, it was better to dismantle it when he encountered it. It was better to be safe than sorry. There was no need to solve the problem of the electronic eye. They did not have any shielding equipment on them. If the electronic eye malfunctioned, the soldiers guarding the electronic eye would be certain that it was sabotaged. Thus, the soldiers stationed at the final position, as well as the senior commanders in the command center, were shocked. After ending the call with the Xiao and the others, Li Jinyin said to Yi Qian, "Don't alert them. Let's go around them." His combat style was a little different from Xia Jinyuan's. Perhaps it was because he operated underwater, so he paid more attention to immersion warfare. Without alerting any sentinels, he would silently sneak into the interior and carry out destructive operations. At this time, Yi Qian would definitely listen to the commander's instructions. He nodded lightly and crawled in the snow with him, waiting for the 4 patrolling soldiers to leave. While waiting, Yi Qian could not help but think of Xia Jinyuan's side. He did not know what the situation was like over there. Right now, they must be on some mountain top, staring at the final position like wolves. They preferred to assassinate directly. Once they discovered the sentinels, they would immediately take care of them. They would not let a single one of them go. Moreover, they would clean them up without leaving a single trace. Chapter 1651. On the other hand, Demon King Li was different. He focused on the ultimate destructive battle. He didn't alert a single person at the start, and only caused a big explosion at the end. By the time the enemy reacted, it would already be too late. His side had already completed their operation and was preparing for the final clearing operation. However, they really needed to conserve their strength now. They had to use their best energy to hunt the members of the Snowfield Brigade and not waste their energy at the beginning. It couldn't be helped. The Storm Commandos focused on underwater training, and their main mission was also underwater missions. Faced with such a snowy climate, the Storm Commandos still couldn't fight in all weather and all areas without obstacles like the Snowfield Brigade. This match was enough for the members of the Storm Commandos and the Navy's commander to see the difference between them and the Snowfield Brigade. Although they weren't as good as them, to be able to complete a match with such a powerful special forces team that could fight across different branches of the military was definitely an accumulation of experience. It was also a sign of direction in the future. The north wind that had stopped started blowing again. Although it wasn't as strong as it was in the afternoon, the temperature dropped quickly at night. When it blew over, it felt like it could freeze one's heart. Yi Qian had followed Principal Chun to the snowy highlands and had already received cold-resistant training. Therefore, although she felt the cold, it didn't affect her. 2 members of the Storm Commandos were so cold that their ears, hands, and feet had frostbite. Every step they took hurt and itched. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling, as if they were being bitten by a group of ants. The members of the Snowfield Brigade had the advantage. For example, Xia Jinyuan, J5, and the others had stayed in the snowy highlands until the end of the year when they carried out their mission. From time to time, they would even drag the snow leopards out to the barren lands for training. This bit of wind and snow was really nothing to them. At night, the members of the Snowfield Brigade were even more active than during the day. The first 10 members of the Snowfield Brigade had already sneaked into the final position. They had entered the position 12 minutes earlier than Xiao and the others. There are electronic eyes, infrared, and fully equipped Type 95 assault rifles. There are even infrared lasers and infrared illuminators on them. There are also optical sights installed. There's even a night vision device. Damn, Q King, just the equipment on this gun is already better than ours. A member of the Snowfield Brigade who had snuck into the ground observed through his night vision goggles. When he saw the equipment in the hands of 3 of his comrades who were patrolling the area, his eyes widened. Compared to them, we are no different from refugees. When Xia Jinyuan heard his comrade report the equipment on the guns one by one, he looked at the Type 95 assault rifle in his hand and felt infuriated. Other than a scope, the entire gun was empty. Speaking of which local army was fighting against them? Their equipment was a little too high-end, wasn't it? Wasn't this the local army that they had encountered before? Could it be a field army? Since his equipment was inferior to theirs, then Xia Jinyuan's thin lips curled slightly, and he said unhurriedly, "That's easy. Just take their guns and use them." That's right. Major Xia was a scoundrel. His scoundrel behavior had gained the approval of all the members of the Snowfield Brigade. This was a brilliant decision. Don't focus on the equipment. What I said before is still valid. No matter how much equipment you steal, it's not my hobby. My hobby is still to see live Qing Miao. Xia Jinyuan, who was giving his comrades a sweet date to eat, said with a smile. J5, who was closest to him, couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 1652. Why did he feel that Qing Miao was going to be in trouble? Did Qing Miao commit a crime? Q King would only be so ruthless when someone committed a crime. Otherwise, he wouldn't be like this. Did Qing Miao commit a crime? Would she commit a crime? How could the most cautious female soldier commit a crime? Looking at Q King's expression, it was a serious crime. Q King, are you saying that you want them to ambush Qing Miao alone? J5 didn't directly ask what Greenbird had done. Instead, he inquired about it indirectly, so as not to provoke the dark clouds above Q King's head. Xia Jinyuan turned his head and glanced at him. His gaze was as sharp as an eagle's and as fierce as a snow wolf's. After a while, he smiled and said, "Because she needs to be taught a lesson that deserves to be taught a lesson. She did commit a crime, and it was a serious one." J5 didn't ask any more questions. It wasn't the time to ask anyway. His brother's voices came from his earpiece, reporting the latest situation to Q King. There are a lot of sentry posts, and there's even a barbed wire fence with high-voltage electricity. We have to destroy the electricity first. The members of the Snowfield Brigade who had cut in from the west reached the edge of the core position. They stared at the barbed wire fence and rubbed their palms together. They were going to do it. Xia Jinyuan slowly raised his hand and gently pressed down the bush in front of him. He stared coldly at the patrolling soldiers in front of him. Through the night vision goggles, he could clearly see the equipment on the soldiers. It was indeed much more high-end. The red dot sight was much more advanced than the scopes on their guns. The command center was most likely inside. Get their equipment over here first. Just hand over their guns. Xia Jinyuan replied to his comrades. Don't destroy the electricity in a large area. Just take out a transformer and leave an opening for the brothers behind to enter. A few black shadows nestled next to the barbed wire fence received the order. Like ghosts, they crept to the edge of the barbed wire fence and began to destroy it with electricity. There were 4 patrolling soldiers and 2 sentry posts in front of Xia Jinyuan. He lay down again and motioned for the J5 to come closer. Then, he drew on the snow with his finger, taking out 6 of their sentries at once. Q King, aren't we being a little too arrogant? J5 pretended to be surprised, but his expression changed in the blink of an eye. But that's the way to do it. All right, it's settled then. I'll cut in from here. There are 2 trees here for cover. I'll take care of the sentries here. You take care of the sentries here, and then we'll take care of the 4 patrolling soldiers together. He repeated Xia Jinyuan's deployment. The windy night was convenient for the members of the Snowfield Brigade, and it was also very convenient for Yichien. Looking at the equipment in the hands of the patrolling soldiers, the corners of Yichien's mouth couldn't help but curl up. A holographic diffraction, scope, and an infrared laser sight. If he could get his hands on these two things, it would greatly improve his night combat ability. He wouldn't let his target slip away so easily. 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter, cover him. As Yichien approached, Li Jinyan, who cooperated with her, moved out to provide cover. He directly pinned down another patrolling soldier. Then, the soldier was inexplicably killed with a confused look on his face. He was patrolling this area, and, at the same time, he also had a sentry post. When did this man sneak in? I don't want a gun. I only want the equipment on it. On the other side, Yichien ambushed a sentry from behind. With a shoulder throw, he threw the sentry directly into the fluffy snow, and the soldier's face was covered in snow. When he fished the soldier up, 2 tubes of snow even went into his nose. Chapter 1653. Yichien first picked up the assault rifle that had fallen into the snow, then smiled politely at the soldier. Thank you for your hard work. I need to take the equipment on your rifle. I'll return it after this is over. The soldier, who was still in a daze from the fall, did not stop Yichien from taking the equipment on his rifle. This equipment originally belonged to the Special Forces. Otherwise, how could a sentry like them be equipped with such high-end combat equipment? The soldier, who was wiping the snow off his nose, looked around as he patted the snow off his face. He had been standing guard here all this time. The patrolling soldiers had also walked back and forth in this direction, but they had not discovered an ambush. When did this female Special Forces soldier sneak in here? The infrared laser sight used the same principle as the HUD used in fighter jets. A holographic image of the laser was projected onto the sight. The shooter only needed to align the target with the red dot in the center of the image, then pull the trigger, and the bullet would hit the target. There was another advantage to this. Usually, night vision equipment would narrow the field of vision and make it difficult to determine the distance, making it difficult to aim. However, the infrared laser sight could identify the bullet point and allow the shooter to open both eyes at the same time to aim and shoot, greatly increasing the hit rate. Yichien was very satisfied with the equipment he had received. After adjusting the various parameters of the equipment, Yichien saluted the soldier before meeting up with Li Jinyan. Li Jinyan had just installed the red dot sight onto his rifle. This was a piece of equipment that only needed to aim the laser spot at the target to complete the aiming action quickly. Its biggest feature was that as long as the bullet point of the gun and the laser spot on the sight were aligned, even if the viewpoint was slightly off, as long as the gun was pointed in the correct direction, the red laser spot would be able to hit the target. However, the disadvantage was also obvious. Because the laser spot's bullet point was visible, the shooter had to fire immediately in the dark, or else they would be discovered by the enemy. It's a bit surprising. Their individual combat equipment is too high-end. Yichien walked to Li Jinyan and said with some suspicion, "It feels a bit off. The local troops are not field troops. Even the sentries can't be equipped with such high-end equipment." Li Jinyan was adjusting the parameters. When he heard this, he said calmly, "If I'm not mistaken, the command center is inside. Our final position is to attack the command center and then meet with the generals." Yichien suddenly understood. The voice of the Great Mermaid came through the earpiece. They had successfully destroyed the power grid and entered the final battle zone. Li Jinyan and Yichien looked at each other and immediately headed toward the final battle zone. With the Big Mermaid and the others clearing the way ahead, the sentries and patrolling soldiers did not encounter a single one, which meant that the east side was completely cleared out. At the same time, they had all obtained accessories for guns. Some of the water ghosts had even changed their guns. Some had even obtained machine guns. Their firepower was already very strong. The electronic I was still working diligently, and the technicians did not find any movement even after changing the image several times. However, the power grid in the east and west had indeed been partially damaged, which meant that the two teams of special forces had successfully entered the final battle zone. Reporting, KD-7 and TM-12 transformers have been destroyed. Our initial suspicion is that it was caused by two groups of soldiers entering the combat zone. Report, 11 soldiers from 4 sentry posts to the east have been killed. Report, 13 soldiers from 5 sentry posts to the west have been killed. To the east was the entry point for the Devil King, and to the west was the entry point for the Q King. This meant that the two teams were about to meet. Chapter 1654. In the command center, the Navy commander and the Army Major General could not help but sit up straight. They each held a cup of thick green tea and gestured for the technicians to turn on all the electronic eyes so that they could better observe the combat situation of each Special Forces soldier. The flames of war had already begun. The water demons of the Storm Commandos had all gathered and were the first to launch an attack. Destroy the enemy. End the battle quickly. Through observation and the intelligence provided by the scouts, Li Jinyan began to split them into groups according to their shooting and mobility. Big Shark, you take 5 riflemen with you. The main suppressor will be responsible for shooting and 1 machine gunner as backup. Big Shrimp, you'll be the rifleman. I'll provide firepower as backup. Qing Yao, Big Eel, and me will be the roundabout combat team. Big Eel, go in and support Sea Anemone. Sea Anemone was the scout of the water demons. At that moment, he was the closest to the enemy's stronghold. He was also the one who had pinpointed the location of the enemy's stronghold so that Li Jinyan and the others could quickly enter the combat range. With a detailed location and fighting point, Li Jinyan quickly divided the team members into 3 groups. Qing Yao, Big Eel, and himself would be the roundabout combat team. Big Shrimp and the others would be the suppressor team to cover the roundabout combat team as they entered the enemy's camp. At the same time, to protect the rifleman team, Li Jinyan arranged for a machine gunner to be used as backup. This was a reinforcement weapon to make up for the lack of firepower of the infantry. It was used to counterattack the enemy with more ferocious fire, seal off the enemy's movements, and support their comrades in the roundabout combat team. This arrangement was very reasonable. Rifles did not have a large capacity like machine guns. Continuous full-auto shooting would quickly deplete the bullets in a magazine. At that time, the rifleman team would have to change the magazine, which would cause them to be unable to complete their continuous suppressive fire. In this way, the machine gun came into play. The machine gun had the ability to prevent the barrel and magazine from overheating. It could also be continuously reloaded. The continuous firing time was also longer than that of a rifle. This greatly protected the rifleman team. Even if the riflemen changed a magazine or changed their hiding position, they would still be well protected. Big Shrimp belonged to the entire team, including the machine gunner as backup. His suppressive fire would not be too dense. Instead, he would coordinate with the rifleman team and machine gunner to provide support. It was impossible for everyone to run out of bullets at the end of the battle. There had to be a retreat point of firepower. It could be said that Prawn was the most dangerous. Once the rifle team, machine gunners, and the deter operation team failed, he would have to take the lead alone and use his own firepower to suppress his comrades so that they could quickly retreat. The bullets had already broken the tranquility in the depths of the mountain. The resting sparrows were so startled that they rushed into the sky one after another. The pheasants in their nests cried out in fright and scurried in the bushes. A few gray hares seemed to have lost their sense of direction, running here and there. The timid hares were so frightened by the sound of the bullets that they trembled all over. On the screen of the command center, when the sound of bullets pierced through the silence of the night, a line of fire suddenly appeared on the snowy mountain. That was the trajectory of a blank bullet. The soldiers at the enemy stronghold had actually been waiting for a long time. Every one of them was tense, ready to take action as soon as they heard something. Suddenly, the two sides exchanged fire head-on. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of gunfire was so loud that it was deafening. There was a sense of collision that felt like a landslide, as if this place would be razed to the ground in the next second. Chapter 1655. The rifle team was responsible for suppressive fire, so they did not have to hit the enemy. They only had to force the enemy to be unable to move and achieve the effect of resisting the enemy. The entire range was 300 meters, and Shao and the others were equipped with high-end equipment, so they could lock onto targets within a large range and shoot. Beep, beep. Dai Zhansher's voice was heard. It was the sound of the laser marker. In 1999, the various military exercises did not complete the implementation of laser simulators. Although the Soviet Army had developed some light weapon laser simulators in the 1980s, the cost involved was very high, and China was still in the trial stage. This time, in order to use the laser mode confrontation control system, the military had been surveying and building in this mountainous area since May. This was so that the military and the top leaders who were paying close attention to this competition could immediately know the situation of the competition. At the same time, there was also an element of experimentation to see what areas still needed to be perfected and improved. This laser mode countermeasure control system used the transmission and reception of lasers to receive the satellite positioning data, ammunition storage, combat status, and other information from each laser simulator through the communication network. It was then transmitted to the military as quickly as possible so that the top leaders of the country who had been paying attention to this competition could know the progress of the competition immediately. It also allowed the top leaders to know the combat strength of the two teams immediately. Even though the Storm Commandos have only been established for a year, the captain who commanded the battle is very capable. He was able to make this underwater special forces team that started from scratch there to go up against the Army Special Forces that have been around for more than 10 years. On the other hand, the Snowfield Brigade is brave and resourceful. The commander of the deployment is decisive and can complete a destructive battle without losing a single soldier to suppress the firepower of 2 platoons. His combat deployment is very experienced. At 7:30 p.m., the top leaders finish their day's work and arrive at the military headquarters to observe the final confrontation between the two teams. Seeing the confrontation between the two armies, the top leaders had a gratified smile on their face. He gave extremely high recognition to Li Jinyan and Xia Jinyuan's combat skills. Lieutenant General Xia knew that his son had some ability. Although he knew it in his heart, he would never say it out loud. Now that he had received recognition from the top leaders, the lieutenant general still said, "As the leader, how he fights and how he deploys is directly related to the lives of every soldier. He has the lives of all his comrades in his hands, so he must have outstanding ability. You're right. He has to fulfill his duty. As a captain, if you're not outstanding, it's better to abdicate early and let the capable take over." Lieutenant General Xia's words made the highest leader nod in agreement. Both team captains are very outstanding. With them leading, I have great hope for them in next year's competition. I hope they can continue to work hard and return victorious next year. This was the first time that the country had sent out special forces to participate in an international competition. It was equivalent to comparing notes with the best special forces of other countries. Don't talk about friendship first and competition second. As a soldier, there was no second place, only first place. I will definitely not disappoint the country. Lieutenant General Xia stood up and made a military pledge to the highest leader. What the leader of the country wanted was also what he and the thousands of soldiers behind him wanted. Looking at the big screen, the highest leader was observing the entire situation with a dignified gaze. Seeing that the few platoons that had been deployed in advance had been wiped out, the highest leader's mouth tightened. Chapter 1656. The combat ability of the local troops still needed to be improved. The war would not only be a matter of the field troops, but also the responsibility of the second and third line troops. Next year, the military conference will focus on the second and third line troops and the local troops. Let them give the country and the people a result. During the discussion, the highest leader said this to Lieutenant General Xia. The civil service records would be the focus, and they would only need to bring it up at next year's military conference. On the screen, Yi Qian and Li Jinyan had already reached the enemy's position. There was a row of abandoned warehouses about 11 meters long and 4 meters wide used to store wood. The warehouses were made of mud bricks and had triangular roofs, similar to the warehouses in brick factories. The two of them assisted each other in their operation. When Big Eel's voice came from their earpieces, telling them that he had met up with Scout Sea Anemone, Li Jinyan quickly moved and entered the abandoned warehouse. Half crouching, he confirmed that the surroundings were safe. He gestured for Yi Qian, who was half crouching for cover and alert to move. The two of them moved in a crisscross pattern, moving to the rear at the fastest and safest speed. When a few figures appeared in the night vision mirror, Yi Qian quickly switched to semi-automatic shooting and began to surround the rear. Fire from the front. Big Eel, Sea Anemone, attacked from the side. Li Jinyan, fire from the rear. He was fully automatic and provided cover for Yi Qian. A few beeps came from the front. There were already soldiers dead. F***CK. They're outflanked. Support the rear. North. Ugh. Before a soldier could finish, his mouth was covered and he was pulled down from the abandoned wood. He died instantly. Easy, easy. I'm already dead. Why are you dragging me down? Being pulled down from a high place, the soldier was still in a panic. Seeing the other party dragging him by the collar to the corner of the wall, he gritted his teeth in pain as his back landed heavily on a piece of wood. Big Eel chuckled and said, "Brother, help us weigh our feet. The whole wall will collapse if we step on it. Let me borrow your body." He said it shamelessly. The soldier was so angry that his mouth was crooked. "I'm already dead, and you still want to reuse trash?" Yes, yes, yes. Waste, waste, waste. Not only was the Big Eel not angry, it even laughed. The soldiers of this place were quite interesting. They even called it trash. F***CK, hurry up. The unlucky soldiers had no way to resist. If they really died on the battlefield, it was not impossible for them to be used as stepping stones. Big Eel and Sea Anemone cut through the warehouse from the north, which was equivalent to cutting the entire warehouse into two. The two of them attacked from the front and back, one from the front and one from the back. As a result, the soldiers in the warehouse were not only attacked from the front and back, but also from the middle. Machine gunners, advance. Rifle team, move in a roundabout manner. Strangle them from the front and back. Inside the warehouse, Li Jinyan was giving out orders one after another. When the tracer warning came, he immediately said to Yi Qian, "Alert, reload." Tracer bullets were loaded into the magazine in advance, usually in the position of the third last bullet. In this way, as long as a tracer bullet appeared during battle, they would know that they needed to change the magazine. Yi Qian quickly went on alert, while Li Jinyan leaned against the wall and reloaded. Clear advance. Hearing the sound of a magazine being reloaded, Yi Qian knew that he had finished reloading. He accurately eliminated one of the enemy machine gunners, and the firepower of the deep battle was completely eliminated. Chapter 16:57. Big Eel, who was fighting in the middle, said, "Complete the attack. Quick." Soon, Big Eel led the rifle team and finished shooting under the cover of Big Eel and the machine gunners. Bang, 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 bang. The deafening sound of bullets never stopped. Bullet tracks streaked across the snowy night, bringing with them the beauty of a flourishing firework. It was especially beautiful in the snow, but it was also so frightening. In the warehouse, some of the 16 local soldiers were suppressed by the front line to the point that they couldn't move. Li Jinyan and Qing Niao came from behind, and their cooperation was flawless. They broke through the defense line and killed their way in. The entire battle was like an inescapable net that surrounded the entire warehouse, making it impossible for the soldiers inside to advance or retreat. They were suppressed by the firepower to the point that they couldn't even raise their heads. If they did, their heads would be blown off. Elimination complete. Elimination complete. Elimination complete. The front, back, and center were all eliminated. This meant that the entire base had been conquered. From the attack to the outflanking tactic to the complete elimination, this operation took a total of 16 minutes. Next, This place belonged to the Storm Commandos. Turning on the light on his helmet, Li Jinyan pointed at the battle map and deployed again. This is the highest point of the entire base, and it's also our final attack position. The Snowfield Brigade will cut in from the west, and will cut in from the east. Now, we'll wait here. Li Jinyan gently pointed at a coordinate with his thin lips pressed together and said coldly, Big Eel will lead 12 comrades into the final position. Qing Yao and I will complete the hunting operation. Li Jinyan was a little afraid to let Yi Qian out of his sight. Xia Jinyuan's target in the capture plan was Yi Qian. As the captain, he had to protect her. He was afraid that Yi Qian's previous mistakes would make Xia Jinyuan want to teach her a lesson. If it was as he guessed, with Xia Jinyuan's fierce fighting style, he wouldn't just send one person. It was very likely that he would personally go and teach Yi Qian a lesson. Because if it was him, he would have done the same. At this moment, Yi Qian was not as uneasy as before. She had made a mistake, so she would definitely be punished. At this moment, she was not worried about what kind of punishment she would receive. Instead, she was serious about completing the competition until the end. As the sound of gunfire faded, Xia Jinyuan, who was holding a rifle in his hand, looked up at the sky. A faint smile flashed across his thin lips, and he gestured for them to speed up. Walking at the front, he was like an arrow released from a bow, walking faster than anyone else. On the big screen in the command center, they could clearly see the movements of the members of the Snowfield Brigade. They were all gathering toward the command center. The Navy commander looked up at the command tent and said to the Major General of the Army, Good boy, he really managed to find his way here. Our place is well hidden, but he still managed to find it. Omnipotent Soldier King. He can reach the sky and dive into the sea. He could be an eagle in the sky, a dragon in the sea, and a tiger on land. It's not surprising that he was able to find this place. It's just that the Major General of the Army was very satisfied with his soldier's judgment. He paused for a moment and smiled. It's just that I didn't expect him to find his way here so quickly. This speed was a bit too fast. Chapter 1658. Why did it feel like his plan was to go straight to the command center and capture the generals? Reporting, Team B has entered the perimeter of the command center. The sentries outside have been controlled. 4 Team B members have entered. Infrared sensors have been destroyed. 2 Team B members have entered. Speaking of the devil, Major Xia led 6 Snowfield Brigade members into the command center. As soon as they entered, they were blinded by the white lights and couldn't help but raise their hands to cover their eyes. The Navy commander was already laughing out loud. Q King, you actually managed to sneak into the command center. You really got the wrong place. This is not the place for you to fight. Xia Jinyuan, who had already finished his salute, smiled and replied, I just wanted to borrow the command center. Borrow the command center? The Navy commander was confused. He didn't know what Xia Jinyuan was up to. What do you want? We don't have any weapons to lend you. The Army Major General also stood up. Although his face was serious, he couldn't hide the smile in his eyes. Since you've already snuck in, we'll consider our position to have sunk. I'll give you 5 minutes. Once you're done, leave. Yes, sir. Xia Jinyuan saluted again. Then his slender legs strode over to a technical soldier operating the control panel. Brother, I'll borrow it for 5 minutes. Thank you. Z7, who had followed behind him, waited for the technical soldier to stand up before sitting down. The technical soldier didn't stand up immediately. Instead, he asked for instructions from the general first. After getting the general's nod, he stood up and said in a low voice, It's a brand new control panel. Don't press it. The entire command center's instruments and equipment were extraordinarily expensive. They couldn't be picked up without at least 7 digits. The technical soldier was more attentive to them than he was to his ancestors. He was afraid that something would go wrong. Z7 Hanjing patted the technical soldier's shoulder and said seriously, Don't worry, brother. If anything goes wrong, you can take my head. Stop wasting time. Hurry. Xia Jinyuan pushed him to sit down. Show me Qing Yao's position and the final battle position. K7, draw the map. T6 and V8. Cut into Team A's wireless communications and complete the eavesdropping. G3 was in charge of security to prevent the storm commandos from sneaking in. Xia Jinyuan sat down and took off his combat gloves and placed them beside the control panel. His slender fingers typed a series of commands on the keyboard. Then, he freed his left hand on the control panel and pressed a few buttons on the control panel. Xia Jinyuan squinted his eyes slightly. This person was a scout in the Water Ghost movie. As for this person, he had to find out where he was. The technical soldiers at the side were dumbfounded when they saw these special forces soldiers in snow camouflage moving their fingers quickly and skillfully operating various instruments. The scout from the Storm Commandos, the water demon codenamed Sea Thorn, quickly found a new hiding spot. They've been in the command center for 2 minutes. I haven't heard any sounds of fighting. You're right, Devil. The command center isn't our final battle position. Li Jinyan glanced at Qing Miao, who was walking a few steps ahead of him. If they confirmed that this wasn't their final battle position, then Xia Jinyuan would have entered the command center to search for Qing Miao. Chapter 1659. Why would he think that? It was probably just his intuition. Xia Jinyuan valued Qing Miao very much. He had spent so much effort to cultivate her. But in the end, she had committed a grave mistake on the battlefield. Xia Jinyuan would not let Qing Miao off the hook so easily. In that case, should he cooperate with Xia Jinyuan to teach Qing Miao a lesson? Things have been going too smoothly for her, so she should suffer a little. Devil, this is Q King. Just as Li Jinyan was thinking about whether he should cooperate with Xia Jinyuan, an impossible voice sounded in his earpiece. Li Jinyan's expression suddenly turned cold. Their radio waves had been hacked. In other words, the entire communication channel had been jammed and intercepted. I only have 5 minutes. It took me 2 minutes to crack your radio password. After 3 minutes, I will quit and the command center will not be lent to me anymore. Xia Jinyuan actually spoke very fast, but he enunciated every word clearly. His words were sharp, which gave people the illusion that he was speaking very slowly. I need the green bird, and I want to give her a very good gift for our first meeting. I know you have always kept her by your side, and you will send people to protect her. Devil, Qing Miao does not need protection. She needs everyone to be at ease. She can fight against thousands of soldiers and horses by herself, and she can wipe out a company with a sniper rifle. She does not need protection. On the contrary, she needs to be taught a lesson. Do you understand what I mean? His voice was very calm, and there was no anger in it. Even the tone of every word was controlled and flat. It was completely impossible to tell that Xia Jinyuan was feeling emotional. However, Li Jinyan knew that Xia Jinyuan, who was usually calm, was really angry this time. The two of them were the same type of people. The angrier they were, the more emotional they were, and the more they controlled their body language, actions, and all other aspects. They would never let others see that their emotions had changed. I understand, Li Jinyan replied, then calmly asked him, Is that all? Xia Jinyuan's laughter came from the earpiece. This is a big deal, not a small matter. Sorry to disturb you. See you later. He quickly hung up the phone and instructed T6 and V8. All right, switch back. We're done here. That's right. He was here for this matter. He was here for Yi Qian. The group came and left in a hurry. As for the water ghoul scout, Sea Thorn, who had been discovered, he was nowhere to be seen. Xia Jinyuan walked to the spot where Sea Thorn had been squatting and took a look. His dark eyes narrowed slightly. Demon King Li had said that their scouts could complete missions on land and sea. That was indeed the case. It wasn't a normal mission, but a perfect one. The position where he was squatting was less than 3 meters away from the position where the pigeon was squatting. Judging from the footprints he left behind, the tip of his foot was facing the position where the pigeon was squatting. This meant that he had discovered the pigeon at that time, but did not take action. As for the pigeon, a team member who was good at snow and mountain reconnaissance, he actually did not discover the location of the water ghoul scout. The pigeon broke out in a cold sweat. He really did not discover the water ghoul scout less than 3 meters away from him. The Demon King had a lot of talented people under him. He managed to train the entire team in less than 2 years. I have to ask him for some experience. Xia Jinyuan lifted his foot and covered the footprints with the snow beside him. He muttered something and turned to leave. However, Z7 and the others were sweating along with the pigeon because of what he said. The Demon King's training could only be described in one word: cruel. Chapter 1660. If that was the case, their training in the future would most likely be harsh and cruel. Just thinking about those days, ha 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 ha. The senior generals in the command center were all confused by Xia Jinyuan's arrival. Did he make such a big fuss just to contact the team that was fighting against them? There was no conversation during the whole process. It was all about Qing Niao. Major General Lu frowned. He pondered for a moment and then said to the civilian beside him, "Check Qing Niao's whereabouts and get the electronic eye." Xia Jinyuan's words revealed too much. Qing Niao did not need protection. Of course, as a special forces soldier who could fight alone, why would she need protection? She should not be protected, but should be protecting each other with her comrades. In the last sentence, he said that Qing Niao needed to be taught a lesson. Why did Qing Niao need to be taught a lesson? She came to the command center's territory and left after finishing her work. She did not give a proper explanation and instead left them guessing and wondering why Qing Niao needed to be taught a lesson. There's no need to get the electronic eye. Contact me directly, Team B leader. Major General Lu did not want to beat around the bush. He directly asked the technical soldier to contact Xia Jinyuan. Xia Jinyuan, who had already left, did not hide anything. He reported the ins and outs of the matter to Major General Lu. After that, he added, "If we don't grind her, she won't be a useful person. She has too little experience in individual combat. We need to let her experience what kind of cruelty she will face if she fails in individual combat. As a female soldier, she will never be treated well." This was especially true if they were captured by criminals who were internationally organized, disciplined, and had their own set of rules. There was no such thing as preferential treatment of captives. Criminal groups would not abide by any of the conventions and regulations, such as not mutilating captives or subjecting them to any medical or scientific experiments, nor violence, intimidation, or humiliation of captives. Not only would they not abide by these rules, some countries would not abide by them either. Capture you and provide you with good food and drinks. Hell, what wishful thinking. Major General Lu was silent. Yi Qian had indeed made a big mistake. Then, he ordered, "Don't use your methods. Just teach her a lesson. After all, she hasn't officially joined the army yet. She's just a cadet. She hasn't received a complete systematic and professional training, as well as the various assessments of the Snowfield Brigade. You can't rush for quick results. If you make a mistake, you have to admit it. You will still be punished, but you have to know your limits. Do you understand?" Xia Jinyuan agreed, but the look in his eyes was terrifyingly cold. If his girlfriend made a mistake, he would not cover it up, let alone hide it from his superiors. His girlfriend had made a mistake, and as her boyfriend, he was responsible for making her realize her mistake and making her swallow the bitter fruit of her mistake. There was no such thing as repeated mistakes in his dictionary. The first time it happened, he would mercilessly strangle it to death. There would not be a second chance for it to happen. Yi Qian, who was walking, didn't feel cold at all, but she shivered for some reason. Then, the sense of danger from her previous life came crashing down on her like an avalanche, making her stop in her tracks. "What's wrong?" Li Jinyan keenly noticed her abnormality and asked her directly, "Is there a situation?" Yi Qian pursed her lips and scanned her surroundings. There was nothing out of the ordinary, and she didn't feel like she was being watched. That shiver was a little inexplicable. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't inexplicable either. After killing Bai He like that, if Captain Xia knew what was waiting for her. Chapter 1661. What awaited her was definitely not good news. Based on his understanding of him, he would never let her go so easily. Yi Qian lowered his gaze to hide the coldness in his eyes. She was the target of his plan to capture her, and he would never change that. At the same time, He would probably learn from Baihe's mistakes and make more careful arrangements for her. Li Jinyan saw this and didn't say anything else. He didn't tell his comrades that Xia Jinyuan had contacted him alone, and he didn't reveal to Yi Qian what was going to happen next. As they got closer and closer to the final position, Yi Qian, who was walking in the middle, suddenly tensed up. "Someone's here, hide." With a whoosh, a total of 10 team members spread out and quickly hid. "Don't waste your bullets, just take out the 2 sentries." The closer they got to the final position, the more dangerous it was. The storm commandos, who also liked to assassinate, would never alert the enemy if they could do it quietly. In many cases, the special forces liked to assassinate first, taking out the whistles and zhangzi, so that it would be easier for the brothers behind to enter. The team led by the Shao had already exchanged fire. The sound of bullets came from the north and escalated in less than 2 minutes. Bang, 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 bang. The gunshots made Yi Qian's eyes light up. "There's no movement from the west for now. Let's occupy the position first." Li Jinyan, who had snuck up and knocked out a sentry, quickly ordered his team members to occupy the position first while the Shao was distracted by the Shao. Xia Jinyuan needed to capture Qing Yao, so he wouldn't deliberately let Yi Qian fall into the enemy's hands just because he knew about it. He would only proceed according to the original plan. Xia Jinyuan was wrong about one thing. He had never thought of deliberately protecting Qing Yao. That was because they were partners now, and on the battlefield, he had the responsibility and obligation to protect his partner. On the north side, the Shao was suddenly attacked while moving. He led 12 team members and immediately hid behind the nearest cover. After confirming the enemy's general direction and position, he immediately led his team members to shoot continuously. While suppressing the enemy's firepower, he sent 5 team members to move forward again. "Go around the left side, clear the path for the devil, quick." 11 o'clock ahead, machine gunners and snipers. "Kill him. Right away." The sniper from the same team crawled on the ground, then skillfully rolled and quickly moved to another cover. After confirming the clear target at 11 o'clock, he directly killed the enemy machine gunner. The branches in front of them swayed with a hua-hua sound. Someone cursed in a low voice as he retracted his machine gun. He was already dead. "Demon King, we are still about 1 kilometer away from the final position, a platoon of soldiers. There are fewer obstructions ahead, and the field of vision is wide, so the probability of being ambushed is increased." Li Jinyan and the others were already quite close to the final position. There was no cover in front of them. They could either crawl forward or use direct fire to suppress their advance. Observing a slope, Li Jinyan contacted his great mermaid and said, "Restrain the main firepower. We are about 500 meters away from the base." The surrounding sentry posts and stakes had all been destroyed. A few rows of wooden houses were not far ahead. At this time, they could still see sentries walking back and forth. "All right." The Shao immediately ordered 5 of his teammates who had snuck up ahead of time to pull the main firepower of the wooden houses over, causing the enemy to mistakenly think that the houses were also their main firepower. Hearing the sound of bullets getting denser and denser, Li Jinyan led his team to the slope to provide cover. Chapter 1662. The closer they were to the enemy, the higher the risk of being hit. At the same time, they could also hit the enemy more accurately. The 10 figures all lowered their center of gravity as they moved, making full use of the sloped terrain and the snow-covered shrubs as cover. While they were moving, a bullet suddenly shot out and hit the snow-covered shrubs with a bang. The snowflakes instantly splashed up, and Yi Qian, who was moving stealthily, took advantage of the momentum to directly lie down in the snow. Then, countless blanks were fired from the roof of the wooden house. They were discovered. Now, there was no way to move stealthily. They could only suppress the movement with firepower. Everyone lay down in the snow and used the slope to attack the wooden house. Hearing the sound of bullets coming from the north and east, Xia Jinyuan smiled slightly and said to all his comrades, "Let the storm commandos suppress them first. After 5 minutes, we will launch the attack. Leave Qing Yao to me. Pigeons and reinforcements will maintain the main firepower. Q King, don't be too cruel. J5 knew that he was going to teach Qin Niao a lesson. Although he couldn't stop him, he still reminded him. Xia Jinyuan smiled at him and crushed the snow with his combat boots. Although he didn't say anything, his actions and the look in his eyes, J5 couldn't help but pat his helmet. Qin Niao, as a brother, I can only help you up to this point. You can't mess with anyone, but you have to provoke Q King. Sai, just bear with it. He's doing this for your own good. J5 saw that there was no turning back, so he didn't say anything more. It was useless to say more. Qin Niao should be taught a lesson. She was young and inexperienced in individual combat. It would be good for her to be taught a lesson. With this thought, J5 was no longer worried. The Major General of the Army and the Commander of the Navy paid close attention to Xia Jinyuan's movements. When they saw him leading 3 team members step by step to Qin Niao's location, the Major General couldn't help but sit up straight. It's 1 against 4. Qin Niao won't be able to escape. The Navy commander sighed softly. Team B had directly raided the command center for no other reason than to capture Qin Niao. It was clear that Xia Jinyuan wanted to meet Qin Niao for real. Major General Liu pursed his lips and said in a tight voice, Qin Niao's individual combat ability is strong, but she lacks experience. Although she can fight against 4 people, she may not necessarily be captured. Once people saw each other's true abilities, they would no longer treat the match as a competition, but a real fight to the death. The potential of the Special Forces was limitless, and Qin Niao's potential was even more unfathomable. She might not lose if she fought against 4 people at once. He's here. Suddenly, the Navy commander's face changed. He stared at the big screen and saw a member of the Snowfield Brigade, codenamed T6, approaching less than 3 meters away from Qin Niao. Yi Qian was covering for Li Jinyin and the others. At this time, she was in the same position as Prawn, who was in a roundabout battle. She was covering for all her comrades, including the machine gunner's reinforcement position. When she saw her comrades moving to attack the side of the wooden house, she suddenly felt like she was being targeted by a ferocious beast. As long as she turned her head, her neck would be bitten and she would die on the spot. I'm being targeted. You guys focus on fire. Don't worry about me. Yi Qian didn't move immediately. She now needed to take out a machine gun firing point. Since she had already found the target, if she moved now, it would bring destruction to her comrades in front of her. She had no choice. She had to stay where she was and take out the machine gun firing point. Using the infrared laser sight, Yi Qian aimed at a machine gun firing point on the left windowsill of the wooden house. She silently counted how many seconds it would take for the beast to attack her from behind and pulled the trigger. Chapter 1663. Amidst the sounds of gunfire, Yi Qian's single shot was not abrupt. As such, the bystanders would not be able to tell what effect her shot had. Meanwhile, Li Jinyin and the others, who were on the move, could feel that the firepower coming from the wooden house had lessened significantly. Without the suppressive fire from the machine guns, they could move quickly and fight. Be careful, Qin Niao. Once you get captured, think of a way to escape. Li Jinyin did not change his plan, nor did he deliberately ask Yi Qian to stay behind to provide cover. Before he spoke to Xia Jinyuan, he had already made such arrangements. When Yi Qian, who was rolling in the snow, heard this, she only replied with a simple okay before cutting off the call. The T6 combatant, who had made a pouncing motion, was just waiting for himself to leap into the air and capture Yi Qian. But who could have expected such a big change to happen in just 3 seconds? Yi Qian picked up her rifle and rolled down the slope. Wasn't she afraid that she would turn into a human snowball? Nice! Amazing! The Navy commander and the Army's Major General, who were observing the entire process, applauded Yi Qian's calmness. What a wonderful dodge. If she had been 3 seconds slower just now, she would have been pinned down by the T6 combatant. Why does it feel like she knew in advance? Before she fired, her lips seemed to have moved a little. Was she telling her comrades something? After the Navy commander finished applauding, he started to have doubts again. and he realized that every time he saw Yi Qian in action, he would always have countless questions. Actually, the Army's Major General had as many questions as the Navy commander. He also felt like Yi Qian knew that someone was targeting her, so she calculated the time. The second she fired the shot, she held her rifle and rolled away, avoiding the T6 combatant's unarmed attack. If she didn't notice, she would have paused for a few seconds after she finished firing the shot. Then she would have moved to join up with her comrades instead of rolling away from them with her rifle in her arms. The Army's Major General analyzed the situation carefully. So it's very likely that she has already noticed the danger around her and dodged after she finished firing the shot. That was the only explanation. The Navy commander grabbed the cup and drank a mouthful of tea that was close to the temperature of ice. The coldness swept through his mouth, and when the cold tea entered his stomach, it stimulated his spirit 100 times more. He said, "You really have guts. This is a courage that must be possessed." The Demon King led his troops to attack the wooden house, and as a reinforcement to cover for his comrades. Even though she knew that she was in danger, she still had to complete her mission first. Furthermore, Major General Liu thought for a while before continuing. Qing Yao should have calculated the distance between the T6 combatants and how long it would take for them to attack. She should have avoided them immediately after completing the task. Not only are you courageous, but you are also very meticulous. Every time he watched her fight, he could always dig out her strong points. He even felt that watching her fight gave him a sense of invincible and invincible. Xia Jinyuan was right. It was precisely because she was outstanding that she had to be polished. As long as there was even the slightest mistake, she had to be taught a lesson immediately. Otherwise, when the time came, she would harm herself and lose her life because of a small mistake. At this moment, Xia Jinyuan did not smile because of Yi Qian's reaction. On the contrary, his expression became even more solemn. This was because he understood that since Yi Qian was so outstanding, she could not afford to have any mishaps on the battlefield. Otherwise, it would be a great loss to the country and the military. The young major ordered his comrades in a ruthless tone. T6 combatants, fire blanks and force her to come over. Chapter 1664. Yi Qian knew that they were being surrounded and fired blindly from the top of the slope. It was obvious that they wanted to force her into a certain area. She had to think of a way to escape. Escape, Yi Qian, run downhill. Li Jinyan's cold voice came through the earpiece. He calmly told Yi Qian, avoid open areas, run east. The east was sunny, and the trees were more lush than the shady side. There were also more shrubs, and there was also more cover. As long as they entered a complex area, their chances of escaping would increase. Okay, I got it. Yi Qian, who had already gotten up, ran towards the east. As she ran, she did not forget to voice her suspicions. They are coming directly from where I am. Devil King, cut off communications. I suspect that they have a radar tracker. If I don't contact the team, I will definitely still be entangled with them. Once I escape, I will contact the team immediately. It was possible that they had been tracked by radar. Li Jinyan said calmly, remember, never stay in one place. As you run, think of a way to escape. Cover the distance with your pistols. Don't let them get close. This time, Yi Qian was really fighting alone. It was also her first time fighting alone. Let's see what the final outcome would be. He also did not want to see her captured. At this time, Yi Qian had already cut off communications. As she ran, her brain was thinking at high speed. East, no, I can't run to the east. Everyone knew that the east side was lush with trees. Logically speaking, they would choose to run in that direction. Then, the Snowfield Brigade members would also think the same. In that case, it was very likely that they would ambush her in the east. Thinking of this, Yi Qian did not hesitate and immediately gave up on the east side. Then, she remembered that the Snowfield Brigade still needed to complete the mobile battle with the local troops. They might not be able to send out too many members to capture her alone. There was a wide area and few people. She would have a chance to escape. The east side was not her choice, but she needed to test if there were people ambushing her in the east. She also needed to see how many people were ambushing her. If there were really 3 or 4 people, she had to admit that Captain Xia thought too highly of her. You're running faster than a rabbit. Q King, come down. The T6 directly fired at the ground, and the empty cartridges splashed snow everywhere. After a series of gunshots, several bullet holes were left in the fluffy snow. When the T6 combatant, who had been chasing after Yi Qian, saw him running east, he slowed down. His reaction was too fast. Just as he rushed over, Qing Niao, who was in the middle of shooting, suddenly grabbed a rifle and rolled down the mountain. It happened so suddenly that he almost fell into the snow. Xia Jinyuan, who was waiting at the front, knew that the little fox was not easy to catch. Because they needed to capture her, they could not directly aim at her and shoot. If they were shot and killed on the spot, it would be meaningless. It had to be a game of cat and mouse. Trying to play petty tricks? She didn't have any tricks up her sleeves. She had to rely on her IQ, reflexes, actions, judgment, and individual combat skills to escape. There was a wide area and few people, so it would be easy for her to escape. But that would depend on whether she had the ability to do so. There was movement in front of them. The hidden pigeon saw a figure running in a zigzag pattern that was not easy to hit. It was followed by the howling north wind. It was Yi Qian. He's coming. Get ready. The pigeon reminded Xia Jinyuan, who was about 5 meters behind her, in a low voice. 10 meters to go, 9 meters, 8, 7, 6. As she counted, she fell silent. A few seconds later, the pigeon said anxiously, T6, head south. Chapter 1665. Yi Qian took a detour. Since they were forcing her to head east, she definitely wouldn't allow it. She had heard that there were about 3 people. Captain Xia really thought highly of her. He had sent 3 people to capture her alive. Not the east. Choose the south. The combat map indicated that there was a cliff in the south. As long as she got close to the cliff and used the cliff to hide, she could come up from the north and rendezvous with Demon King Li. Not only could she rendezvous with Demon King Li, but she could also attack the Snowfield Brigade from behind. Be careful of the gun in her hand. It's not a rifle, it's a pistol. Xia Jinyuan reacted faster than the 2 of them. His back was arched, and it was as if he had springs under his feet. He instantly dashed out a few meters. Yi Qian was not pinned down by anyone. There was a combat map in her mind, a topographic map. The body's reaction always followed the brain's orders, and the brain's reaction always led the body to follow. There would never be a time when the brain's reaction and the body's reaction went against each other. This was Yi Qian's reaction and judgment. The combination of these 2 made it so that she did not need to stop to think. She could run, think, and deploy her troops at the same time. Thus, she gave the command center the illusion that she was very familiar with this place. She was so familiar that no matter where she ran, it would be correct and would not lead to a dead end. She has memorized the combat map and topographic map. The Major General whispered to the Navy commander. She can only be so familiar with this place if she memorizes it. Otherwise, she won't be able to find a way out so accurately every time. The Navy commander did not need strong tea to refresh himself. He felt excited just by looking at Yi Qian. Her bright and spirited eyes were reluctant to move away from the screen, for fear that she would miss the highlights if she moved her eyes away. She has seen the combat map and topographic map 3 times in total. If she really wants to memorize them, her memory is quite amazing. Yes, her memory is amazing to begin with. That's why I said that she might not lose in a 1 versus 4 battle. The Major General smiled. Xia Jinyuan wanted to teach Qing Niao a lesson and teach her a lesson. He would have to suffer a little in the early stages. The Major General seemed to have thought of something as a smile appeared on his face. The naval commander, who was so focused on the screen, did not notice that he had seen Yi Qian shake off the T6 and take out his gun to shoot behind him at the same time. This time, she used a pistol instead of a rifle. The T6 was the closest to her, and the pistol's range was shorter. Although the hit rate was lower, the pistol was small and compact and was most suitable for running battles. Shooting at such close range forced the T6 combatant to slow down and seek cover in order to avoid being hit. No matter if it was a pistol, a rifle, a machine gun, a sniper rifle, etc., as long as it was in Yi Qian's hands, she would be able to operate it. Her shooting movements were very smooth, and her opponent would tremble in fear. Flank her, flank her. If we don't flank her now, I'm afraid one of us will be wiped out by her. The T6 combatant dodged the bullets and panted. She's even using the pistols as a rifle. Her shooting was smooth, and there was not much time between each bullet. It was precisely because of this that the T6 combatant was trembling in fear. Xia Jinyuan knew that it would be difficult to capture Yi Qian alive. Otherwise, he would not have personally gone in a battle and let the J5 take on the Demon King. When he heard that, he picked up his pistol and fired in the direction Yi Qian was fleeing. Bang! A blank bullet hit a tree to the right. Yi Qian's expression changed slightly, and she ran even faster. Her slender figure was really like a rabbit, zigzagging left and right in a zigzag pattern. It made it impossible for the people behind her to aim properly, and could only shoot blindly. Chapter 1666. Before the gunshots could fade away, a second, third shot came one after another. Yi Qian, who was already running fast enough, suddenly sped up again. It was as though he had a motor attached to him as he ran. Following that, he looked like a swimmer who had jumped into a swimming pool. His posture was extremely elegant and agile as he jumped over a fallen tree. When he landed, he rolled and hid in the blink of an eye. Take cover. When Xia Jinyuan saw this, he immediately warned the T6 combatant and Pigeon in a low voice. He knew she was going to counterattack. She still had a rifle and a pistol on her. As for the ammo capacity, he did not know. But one thing was for sure, she definitely did not have as many ammo as the three of them. Pigeon and the T6 combatant rolled in the snow to avoid Yi Qian's blind shots. Pigeon, who was half crouching behind a tree, said softly, as expected of Qing Niao, "She's quite difficult to deal with. Q King, can the three of us capture her alive? She's too familiar with the terrain. She's been running very accurately without making a single mistake. Although she's running away now, it's as though we're chasing after her according to the escape route we set for her. We're not chasing after her according to the route we planned." It felt like they were being led by the nose. Xia Jinyuan replied, "It's only been 5 minutes. You want to capture Qing Niao in 5 minutes? Do you really think we're catching a bird? Qing Niao is the predecessor of a phoenix. Do you understand? A phoenix is also a bird," the T5 combatant answered in all seriousness. "I feel like we're catching a bird, but it's a little difficult." When he said that, Pigeon wanted to laugh, but did not dare to. "If you want to capture her, I'll give you 10 days off when we get back, so you can go chase after your girlfriend." Xia Jinyuan was very generous as he threw out such bait to make the T6 combatant willingly take the bait. He said bravely through his earpiece, "Come on, Q King. What can I do for you?" Xia Jinyuan did not stand on ceremony. "Just move around and suppress her with your firepower. Pigeon and I will attack from the left and right. Don't hold back with your bullets, and don't waste them too much either. Don't end up with a tracer bullet." "No problem. No problem. I still have 2 more magazines, so I have enough bullets." The T6 combatant laughed. After laughing, he raised his rifle and quickly provided cover for his comrade. Yi Qian would not fight them with bullets. The 3 of them chased after her, and only one of them opened fire. It was obvious that they wanted her to run out of bullets so that the 3 of them could capture her alive. With a cold gaze, Yi Qian pursed his lips. After firing 4 shots with his pistol, he no longer hid in the same spot. Instead, he carefully moved his body and continued to run. She was running downhill, and her feet were stuck in the snow. She couldn't stop and ran south with all her strength. She couldn't stop. If she did, she would be surrounded. She's running away again. She's not a bird but a rabbit, right? The T6 combatant was dumbfounded. If she doesn't become Q King, How long can we keep chasing her like this? J5 is up against Demon King. Let's not lose. Pigeon, who had caught up to him, replied, what we need to do now is to exhaust Qing Yao's stamina and bullets. We won't lose, even if we have a captive on our hands. Xia Jinyuan did not reply. He strode forward and stepped into the snow with his combat boots. When he pulled them out, he could feel the hostility in them. If Qing Yao, who was groomed by a sergeant major and a world-class sniper, was captured by the three of them in less than 10 minutes, then she would not be everyone's pride. She would also have let down old Uncle Jin and Uncle Chun. At this moment, Yi Qian clearly understood that as a special forces soldier, he should not confront the enemy unless he had no other choice. If he could carry out an assassination, he must do so. That was the wisest course of action. Chapter 1667. She also understood that when she was fighting alone, she could only rely on herself. There was no way she could count on timely support. Even if there really was support, she was the only one who could save herself when there was no support. Run. She could only run now. Run to the next advantageous position and hide before launching a counterattack. The naval commander who was watching the battle narrowed his eyes. He saw Xia Jinyuan starting to speed up in an attempt to block Qing Yao from the front. Following that, the T6 combatants started firing again from behind, while the pigeons cooperated with the entire operation. Occasionally, they would fire to distract Yi Qian so that she did not have time to pay attention to the situation around her. She kept running south. If that's the case, the Major General of the Army carefully looked at the battle map on the table and then at the topographic map. He tapped his finger on a spot and understood why Yi Qian was running south. There were cliffs in the south. A place like this that was considered a hopeless situation for ordinary people was a good place for the Special Forces. What do the Special Forces usually train for? Climbing ravines and cliffs were all part of their training. When the Snowfield Brigade was guarding the plateau and building a base station, they would climb the steep mountains that were often covered in snow and were so weathered that even snow leopards would have a hard time climbing them. Qing Yao had traveled through hundreds of thousands of forests in the western province with Soldier King Old Chun. So how could she not have climbed cliffs before? She ran in that direction because she knew there were cliffs in the south. She knew that, and so did Xia Jinyuan. He had broken into the command center and pulled out all the electronic cameras. He then connected to the satellite map and looked at the terrain and topography of the entire position before getting his comrades to draw a map. It was clear that he had a plan in mind. After discovering Yi Qian's intentions, he immediately chased after her and cut her off. It had to be said that this match was extremely exciting from beginning to end. The match between Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan was exciting. The members of the two teams were also exciting. Now that he was going up against Yi Qian again, it was exciting. On the other side, Li Jinyan and J5 were already engaged in a fight. Both sides moved like ghosts in the forest, quietly descending to each other's side. Then, fist met fist, foot met foot, and when the close combat ended, it meant that one side had died. Li Jinyan looked cold, but when he was hunting, he was surprisingly gentle. He liked to kill from a distance, and as soon as he heard the beep sound, he would immediately turn away, not giving the members of the Snowfield Brigade a chance to search for him. To be called the Demon King and be respected by his teammates, his individual combat ability was definitely terrifying. At this moment, he was already facing the members of the Snowfield Brigade. It was up to the Snowfield Brigade to delay him. Whether it was individual combat or team combat, the members of the Snowfield Brigade were all elites in the Special Forces. They were not afraid to fight the Demon King. Instead, they were all extremely excited, and their eyes shone with a fierce light. He really is the Demon King. He comes and goes without a trace. Just now, one of our brothers was killed here. He was shot in the back, which means that the Demon King's range of activity is now in this area. J5 and his 4 comrades squatted together and began to deploy. The brothers in charge of security were constantly looking around to prevent a sneak attack. We'll flank him from outside his range of activity. Sparrow Hawk, you attack, Eagle Magpie, and I will be responsible for searching the periphery. Now that the Storm Commandos have lost 4 members and 2 of our brothers are dead, we have to prevent the Demon King from attacking from behind. Chapter 1668. After arranging the 5-man teams, J5 said to all his comrades, "Team up in pairs. Don't stray too far away unless there are special circumstances. The water ghosts are used to fighting in the water and like to shoot people from behind. Actually, they also like to shoot people from behind. The difference was that they like to get close to the enemy and finish them off with a dagger. Sometimes, they would press down on the enemy's head with both hands and twist it hard. The dislocation of the enemy's cervical vertebrae would be solved without bleeding. The Snowfield Brigade arranged for the hunting team. Li Jingyan and the others did the same. It seemed like only one member of the Storm Commandos was moving, but in reality, there was another person who was always in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Underwater combat was different from combat on land. In underwater combat, the water ghosts would never act alone. They had to work in pairs. At the same time, one person would be in the open and the other in the dark. Li Jingyan was now in the open, while the whale beside him was in the dark. The two of them moved back and forth, looking for a target to hunt. His communication with Yi Qian had been cut off. Yi Qian had turned off his communicator on his own accord. Now that he had not contacted him for a long time, it was clear that he still had not escaped. Q King had personally captured Qing Niao alive, and Qing Niao was afraid that she would implicate the Storm Commandos, so she had turned off her communicator. Then he had to hurry up and kill a few more members of the Snowfield Brigade. Only then would he be worthy of Qing Niao's sacrifice. What he did not know was that Yi Qian had been completely blocked off at this time. When Yi Qian saw the tall figure standing in the snow about 4 meters away from him, his pupils suddenly contracted. At the same time, there was a bright light in his dark eyes. Captain Xia, he had actually come personally to block him. It was the first time he met him. Yes, when he was 14 years old, he was training with the soldiers of Fujian Town in the forest. Captain Xia had suddenly barged in, and that was when they met. So many years had passed, but Yi Qian could still remember every minute and every second of that time clearly. There's nowhere to run. Qing Niao. Xia Jinyuan coldly looked at the female soldier who had made a mistake and deserved to be taught a lesson. There was not a trace of gentleness in his dark eyes. Next, you will become a captive and experience the treatment of a captive. His voice was very, very cold, without a trace of gentleness. There was no gentleness in his voice, nor was there any gentleness in his voice, because this was a battlefield, and the two of them were on opposite sides, enemies. Following that, he gestured to the T6 combatants and Pigeon who were flanking him. The 3 of them approached Yi Qian in a triangular formation. Qing Niao, there are no familiar faces on the battlefield. No matter how familiar a person is, as long as they're in different camps, they're enemies. As enemies, we will not give you preferential treatment just because you are someone we know and a female soldier. There is only one principle on the battlefield, and that is who wins and who loses. Xia Jinyuan said faintly as he walked. Every word he said was filled with coldness and indifference. As the distance between the 4 of them got closer and closer, Yi Qian, who was pursing his lips, couldn't help but touch his left wrist. It had been a long time since he had used his silver wire. In the final head-on confrontation, 2 of the 3 combatants threw punches and 1 kicked. They attacked Yi Qian mercilessly. From the beginning, this battle had been a battle of numbers and strength. However, Yi Qian was not a tough nut to crack. Since there was no way to escape, he would fight to the death and win himself a chance of survival. Chapter 1669. The unsharpened combat dagger quickly parried Xia Jinyuan's kick. That's right, the most ruthless of the 3 was Xia Jinyuan, who was her boyfriend. He immediately launched an attack with his leg. His move gave the T6 combatant and the Pigeon a fright. Wasn't he too ruthless? Did he really think they were enemies? After forcing Xia Jinyuan into a corner, Yi Qian quickly parried the T6 combatant's fist with his dagger. Faced with Xia Jinyuan's next kick, she raised her left leg and struck it down without hesitation. At the same time, she turned her body sideways to ensure that she could dodge and counterattack at the same time. At this moment, her flexibility also played a huge role. With her right leg raised almost to the top of her head, Yi Qian struck Xia Jinyuan's calf with lightning speed. Then she used the force from his leg to turn around nimbly. Just like in a martial arts movie, her entire body twisted strangely to avoid the T6 combatant's fist once again. Xia Jinyuan, who had been kicked in the calf, pursed his lips tightly. When he retracted his leg, he secretly clenched his fist. It was quite painful. The rabbit has turned into a snake. The T6 combatant retracted his fist and attacked again with the pigeon. Yi Qian's first agile dodge made Xia Jinyuan scoff coldly. It was a half-smile that was full of ferocity and cruelty. Compared to the wrestling match he had with Yi Qian when he was 14, Xia Jinyuan was not joking at all this time. He used his own fighting style on the battlefield to force Yi Qian closer. Q King, don't be too ruthless. Are you really planning to beat him to death? The pigeon leaned close to Xia Jinyuan and said in a low voice with a frown, "We already have the upper hand when it's 3 against 1. Don't you think you're going too far?" Xia Jinyuan moved his wrist and glanced at the pigeon coldly. He said indifferently, "What's too far? Haven't we encountered a 3 against 1 situation before? Is a real 3 against 1 like this? A real 3 against 1 would be even more ruthless than this. You could even lose your life at any time. What am I too much of? Oh, Qing Miao should be glad that now we are all soldiers of the same country, wearing the same military uniform, and having a competition between brothers. If we were to face off against each other on the battlefield, would it still be like this? Are you here to tell me that it's too much? You'll only be more ruthless than me and try your best to get rid of the target." The T6 combatant's calf was kicked by Yi Qian. The combat boots were quite heavy, and the toe and heel of the boots were very hard. In addition, Yi Qian had been carrying weights on his legs when he was training with Principal Chun. As such, this kick caused the T6 combatant so much pain that his calf bone felt like it had cracked. When he dodged the kick, he saw Xia Jinyuan, who was the first to be kicked, secretly moving his ankle around. The T6 combatant gloated a little. So it turned out that Q King was also in pain. He had thought that he was not in pain. Don't give her a chance to make a move. Feeling that the pain in his calf had subsided a little, Xia Jinyuan reminded his comrades to prevent them from getting kicked by her again. This was also the first time he had experienced the strength of her legs. Once he got kicked, the pain would be unimaginably painful. When Yi Qian heard that, her eyes flickered as she marked the first target as the pigeon. Before the 3 of them could attack again, Yi Qian, who was holding onto the end of the silver wire, kicked at the pigeon with a murderous aura. In the snow, her figure was as agile as a cheetah as she took the initiative to attack with the ferocity of a beast. Uncle Chun had said that in a desperate situation, the only way to survive was to take the initiative to counterattack. She needed to win a chance of survival for herself, so she had to take the initiative to counterattack. When the pigeon saw this, her expression changed. Chapter 1670. At this moment, Yi Qian had already entered a state of confrontation between himself and the enemy. He was going to use his true abilities to take on 3 people at once. If he had accepted the challenge with the mentality that they were all familiar with each other, the first person he would have killed would have been her. Besides, her target was herself. Feeling a chill in her heart, Pigeon was no longer swayed by personal feelings. At this moment, a hint of a smile flashed across Xia Jinyuan's eyes. Very good. She was able to quickly find a weak spot to attack, even when she was surrounded. This meant that she did not panic and had remained calm all this while. In that case, let's see how far she can go. T6, block her path of retreat. The cold and emotionless Major Xia did not even remember that he was still the female soldier's boyfriend. He only had one goal now, which was to teach this female soldier a lesson. Let her remember this lesson. As an all-around A soldier, How could Xia Jinyuan's close combat skills be bad? Seeing that Yi Qian was using Pigeon as an opening to attack, he threw out a punch to support his comrade. His fist was aimed at Yi Qian's shoulder. Yi Qian ignored his attack and continued to kick Pigeon to the side. While she was dodging left and right, she suddenly grabbed something in her left hand and threw it forward. Something unexpected happened, and the battle turned around in an instant. Pigeon felt something cold and soft, like silk wrap, around the back of her neck. Then she saw Yi Qian tug at it with his right hand. In the blink of an eye, her neck was wrapped tightly by the foreign object. Instinctively, Pigeon tried to pull off the foreign object wrapped around her neck with one hand, but it turned out to be thin and slippery. There was no way she could pull it out with her bare hands. At the same time, Yi Qian's shoulder was punched hard by Xia Jinyuan's fist. Meanwhile, the T6 soldier kicked Yi Qian's knee. The moment Yi Qian, who had been attacked from above and below, let go of the silver wire in his hand, he was knocked to the ground by the two Special Forces soldiers. Even so, Yi Qian did not fall to the ground because of the heavy object. Instead, he quickly propped himself up on his elbows and rolled continuously in the snow. "I've been taken care of." The Pigeon removed the thing that was wrapped around his neck. If Yi Qian had not let go of him when he fell to the ground, he would have been knocked unconscious by this thing. It wasn't to the extent of suffocation. He wasn't that easy to deal with. But if they were on the battlefield, Yi Qian definitely wouldn't let go of the opportunity to finish off his enemy. Xia Jinyuan was a little surprised. Not bad. She could still deal with the pigeons under such circumstances. Not only was she calm, but she also knew how to plan. "Not bad, continue," he said in a low voice. He did not wait for Yi Qian, who was covered in snow, to get up. Like a wild wolf pouncing on its prey, he began to attack Yi Qian again. Yi Qian, who had been rolling continuously, was forced into an extremely sorry state by him. When his military boot kicked him in the back, Yi Qian thought he would spit out a mouthful of blood. That kind of pain was even more intense than the pain of getting injured during training. It came at a moment's notice. Even after a long time, he still felt the same pain as when he was kicked. It was as if he had been pressing on the most painful acupoint, and he could not get over it at all. When his brain received the pain transmitted by his neurons, Yi Qian's cerebral cortex was so tense that even wearing a helmet felt like it was a hindrance. It had been 27 minutes since he was discovered. T6 and Xia Jinyuan attacked Yi Qian from the front and back. Both of their fists and thighs landed on Yi Qian's body. They were not randomly hitting and kicking him, but they were all very skillful. Yi Qian couldn't even remember how many times he had rolled in the snow. Every time he rolled and stood up, he would grit his teeth and fight back with all his might. "Still not going to admit defeat?" Xia Jinyuan asked with a smile. His fist was aimed at Yi Qian's face. "Little fox, you dare to use your own life to test Bai He. Now, do you still dare to use the same trick to test her?" Chapter 1671. Admit defeat? Yi Qian, who was enduring the excruciating pain without making a sound, sneered. Admit defeat? She had already lost completely in her previous life. In this life, she could forget about admitting defeat, much less lowering her head. She had already been entangled with them for nearly half an hour, so she did not know how the Infernal was doing. Without Q King around, the Infernal still had a chance of winning against the Snowfield Brigade with his combat skills. Furthermore, Sea Anemone and Sea Thorn were both army scouts, so they would provide a lot of help to the Storm Commandos who were not familiar with fighting in the snow. She could not admit defeat. The Infernal's hunting operation was not over yet. She had to do her best to pin down Q King and give the Infernal more hope of defeating the Snowfield Brigade. She had to think of a way to pin down Q King, while also try her best to get away. Tilting his head, Yi Qian crossed his arms to block Xia Jinyuan's fist that was swinging at his face. He replied with a ruthless expression, "No." Then he raised his leg and kicked at the Infernal's lower abdomen at lightning speed. This kick made the T6 combatant feel pain for Xia Jinyuan. There was a thin diaphragm between the abdomen and the chest. Anyone who knew how to fight knew very well that as long as the opponent was hit there, he would definitely be rolling on the ground in pain. Moreover, Yi Qian's kick was quite strong. He had probably specially trained to make up for the lack of strength in his arms. If it were not for their thick skin and thick flesh, their bones would have been fractured by this kick. After Q King took such a kick, the T6 combatant felt like his teeth were going to ache. How painful would that be? Fortunately, he only staggered a few steps. He shrugged his shoulders in a very masculine manner and twisted his neck. Without any hesitation, he raised his leg again and kicked at Yi Qian. It was fine if he did not admit defeat, but he had to admit his mistake. He had to take a good look at what a real battlefield was like, what a real fight to the death would be like. Xia Jinyuan's thin lips curved into a smile as he stared at the pair of dark eyes that were glowing with a strange light. However, the coldness in his eyes did not subside at all as he stared at Yi Qian viciously. "You're so beautiful, so good, and so stubborn. How could you make such a low-level mistake?" When he thought of Yi Qian's previous mistakes, Xia Jinyuan's gaze turned even colder. He gestured to T6, and the two of them attacked Yi Qian from the front and back again. When T6 fist and Xia Jinyuan's right leg landed on Yi Qian's body, the pigeons who were watching the battle from close range pursed their lips and couldn't help worrying for Yi Qian. Sitting in the command center, the Navy commander and Major General of the Army held their breaths. They were all waiting to see how Yi Qian would escape from this hopeless situation. But this time, it would be difficult. Both of them had used their full strength. If she wanted to escape again, it would be difficult. Before they could think of the word difficult, the two high-ranking officers suddenly clapped their hands and said in unison, "Good, beautiful." Yi Qian had already wrapped her arms around the T6 combatant's waist and inserted her right leg between his legs. Then she abruptly hooked the T6 combatant's left leg and performed a beautiful Mongolian-style wrestling. She actually tripped the T6 combatant. That's right, he really tripped the 8-meter-tall and strong T6 combatant. Bam! The two of them fell into the snow together. When the T6 combatant fell, he pulled Yi Qian down with him and shouted at the same time, "Lock it tight." Yi Qian's dagger, which had never left his hand, was moving towards the T6 combatant's neck. When the tip of the dagger was close to the skin of his neck, an extremely sharp kick came from behind her. Together with the howling north wind, a heavy object landed heavily on her back. Chapter 1672. Xia Jinyuan had kicked Yi Qian in the back again. Yi Qian, who had fallen forward, gasped when the T6 combatant's helmet hit his abdomen. Yi Qian, who was in so much pain that he felt like he had been run over by a car, rolled off the T6 combatant and grabbed a handful of snow with both hands to throw at the head of the black figure who was pouncing on him. At this moment, Yi Qian was in so much pain that his vision was a little blurry. The only thing he could rely on was the north wind to keep his mind clear and not let himself pass out from the pain. The T6 combatant got up from the snow while rubbing his neck. That was close. His throat had almost been slit just now. What a terrifying Qing Yao. Her attack was so vicious. However, when a single soldier encountered such a predicament on the battlefield, they were all thinking of taking out as many enemies as they could. Although Qing Yao's attack was vicious, it had to be this way. Furthermore, Q King was pressuring Qing Yao to make her realize the cruelty of the battlefield. Victory could only be won by relying on actual skills and not by making use of so-called sympathy. How could there be any sympathy when it came to meeting a bullet head-on? There was only a fight to the death. Yi Qian grabbed 2 clumps of snow and threw them over. Other than being blinded by the snow for a second, Xia Jinyuan's speed did not change at all. In fact, he did not even pause for a second. On the battlefield, he was a fearless soldier who fought for victory. His right hand had already grabbed Yi Qian's ankle like a fierce crocodile out of the water biting down on its prey. His handsome face was cold and ruthless as he planned to drag Yi Qian upside down across the snow. Right now, he was telling her very seriously and responsibly what a captive would experience. What would the outcome be if she risked her life to test the waters? Q King is probably angry. The Major General narrowed his eyes and stared at the screen with a serious expression. He said in a deep voice, he wants Qing Niao to forever remember that when the day comes when the people she is most familiar with start fighting with each other, her previous actions were undoubtedly suicidal. The correct method should be like what we're doing now. As long as we still have a breath of life, as long as there's a glimmer of hope, we need to rise up. The Navy commander nodded in agreement. That's true, but Qing Niao's performance is remarkable. As long as she can stand up, she will fight back. She's fighting 1 against 3, and they're 3 male Special Forces soldiers. It's quite impressive that she lasted for half an hour. Yes, but it's still a little difficult to escape. Major General Liu did not think that Yi Qian had completely lost. When Xia Jinyuan grabbed her ankle and dragged her along, she was still able to fight back and break free again. It was enough to show how strong her desire to escape was. As long as he didn't admit defeat, he still had a chance to live. The T6 combatant pulled back his fist as he gritted his teeth so hard that a few of his teeth seemed to have cracked. You have no strength, Qing Niao. Gritting his teeth and shaking his hands, the T6 combatant cooperated well with Xia Jinyuan. He either attacked from the left and right, or from the front and back. Although his face and body were aching from Yi Qian's punches, it did not affect the speed of his attacks. Yi Qian, indeed, did not have much strength left. She could faintly feel her legs trembling in pain. There was no part of her body that did not hurt. The punches to her chest seemed to have knocked her internal organs out of alignment. You can admit defeat now, Qing Niao. Xia Jinyuan, who blocked her way out, spoke coldly. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as he looked at the swaying figure. He said coldly, "This is a battlefield. Do you still dare to stretch your neck out?" Chapter 1673. Little Fox, your intelligence should be the great wisdom of strategizing and fighting from thousands of miles away, not the petty cleverness of a villain. Yi Qian, whose arm was trembling from the beating, took a deep breath and tried his best to clench his trembling fingers into a fist. Then, he threw another punch straight at the T6 combatant. She did not want to talk to them. She would rather use all the energy she had to talk to fight. They watched as she was knocked down again and stood up again and again. As Yi Qian stood up again and again, the battlefield moved closer to the edge of the forest. Every time Yi Qian stood up again, he would face the 2 combatants attacking him with an awe-inspiring and fearless attitude. He would grit his teeth and endure the severe pain in his body as he threw punches and kicks. He would fight with extreme calmness. She would escape, and the time for her to escape was getting closer and closer. As long as she reached the edge of the forest, she would definitely be able to escape. Xia Jinyuan's deep black eyes flickered with a faint light. He looked thoughtfully at the forest covered in thick snow, and a cold smile appeared on his thin lips. Very good. She still hasn't given up on escaping. Most of the time, it wasn't that you didn't have a chance to escape, but that you didn't hold on any longer and just gave up. You gave up on survival and chose death. Xia Jinyuan, who had discovered Yi Qian's plan, pursed his thin lips tightly. His combat boots stomped fiercely in the snow. After suppressing the strange look in his eyes, the young major dealt the final blow to Yi Qian. Q King, Qing Niao, the T6 combatant and Pigeon shouted. Seeing their familiar figure fly out like a kite with its string cut and fall heavily into the snow, the 2 combatants' hearts trembled. Pigeon had already run over. Before she ran off, she did not forget to glare fiercely at her captain. Wasn't this a little too ruthless? Even if there was a plan to capture her, it shouldn't have been this ruthless. Q King, are you crazy? The T6 combatant scolded in a low voice. You could have captured her just now, so why did you have to kick her at the end? Aren't you afraid of seriously injuring her? Xia Jinyuan's eyelids trembled as he watched the pigeon run towards the figure that had yet to get up and was about 3 meters away from him. While the T6 combatant was not paying attention, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the last glimmer of light in his eyes had disappeared. He looked at the T6 combatant and said coldly, It's better to be seriously injured by my kicks than to be captured and tortured by the enemy. More than any of you, I don't want to see her seriously injured, and I don't want to see her beaten into the snow and motionless. But I'd rather be the one teaching her a lesson now. Not. There was a hint of hoarseness and bitterness in his cold voice. It was low and heavy, like bitter gourd juice in Coptis. It was bitter, astringent, sour, and forbearing. It instantly made T6's heart ache. He looked at his captain and then at the figure who had yet to stand up. He loosened his clenched fists and took a deep breath. Can we end this now? Can you take her back now? Was it over? Could he take her back now? Without really capturing Yi Qian, Xia Jinyuan glanced coldly at the T6 combatant and walked forward with his long legs. Qing Niao, Yi Qian, how are you? Are you all right? Pigeon had already run to Yi Qian's side. Just as he was half kneeling and reaching out, his hand froze. Chapter 1674. Only when he crouched down did he realize that Yi Qian was not lying in the snow. Instead, his elbow was propped up against the snow, and his right leg was slightly bent. This was a jumping motion. Qing Niao, she had not given up on running away. Pigeon, you've broken the rules. Yi Qian raised his head and smiled gently at Pigeon, who was concerned about him. As the one who died, you should be standing by the side and watching. It was not the end yet. She could still open her eyes and still had strength in her arms and legs. As long as there was a chance of survival and strength, she would not give up. As a male soldier, Pigeon's face was full of shock. She could still continue at this point. Female soldier Qing Niao, how much more do you have to earn the admiration of the male soldiers? In this second, Pigeon was completely convinced. He was truly convinced. He was convinced by this female soldier who was even more tenacious than the male soldiers. He was convinced by this female soldier who never bowed her head or admitted defeat no matter what. Pigeon watched as she rushed straight into the forest after completing her jump. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure rushing into the forest before her. He opened his mouth and slowly closed it. It was not until Yi Qian's figure entered the forest that Pigeon said softly, Q King is waiting for you up ahead. Qing Niao, you won't be able to escape. When it comes to female soldiers, I'm really only convinced by Qing Niao. She can still escape in such a state. The T6 combatant who was walking over also had a look of shock on his face. He turned his head and said to Pigeon, Do you admit defeat? The T6 combatant was already amazed by Yi Qian's tenacious resistance. If he had held off Q King for another 30 seconds, Qing Niao would have been able to escape right under their noses once she escaped into the forest. The dull sound of snow falling could be heard from the forest. Pigeon glanced at the T6 combatant who had no intention of following her in. He nodded and retreated to the side. Those who died in battle were not qualified to speak, so they could only speak silently in their hearts. Yi Qian, who had fled into the forest, clenched his fists out of habit when he saw the tall figure that suddenly appeared in front of him. Her dark eyes were brighter than the stars in the cold night, filled with coldness. She stared at Xia Jinyuan, who was determined to capture her alive. Now that he had truly encountered him, what were his chances of winning? Yi Qian couldn't answer herself. She only knew that she didn't want to become a captive. She didn't want to fall into his hands. Too slow. You should be like me. In the face of Yi Qian's slow attack, Xia Jinyuan's leg was still as fast as lightning, aiming for Yi Qian's chest. Do you know what it feels like to be surrounded by a single soldier? Just like this, he wanted to escape, but there was nowhere to run. The military boot kicked Yi Qian's blocking arm. Yi Qian, whose arm was about to break, gritted his teeth and stabbed the blocking dagger that had never left his hand. Do you know what will happen to female soldiers if they become captives? Your body will be violated, your mind will be suppressed, and your will be destroyed. They will even make you suspect that you were born a mistake. Xia Jinyuan nimbly avoided the dagger. He wanted to knock the dagger out of Yi Qian's hand, but the dagger brushed past his chin. His skin hurt a little. Although the dagger wasn't edged and wasn't sharp enough, the person who held it used all his strength and used it as a weapon that could hurt people. so it could still hurt people. Xia Jinyuan touched his chin. It was probably bleeding, so it hurt a little, but his chin had been punched a few times by her, so it was fine to let it bleed a little. Qing Niao, how much longer can you hold on? You've used up all your strength. You can't hold on much longer. He was like a cat toying with a mouse, patiently teasing Yi Qian, but his fist was still as fast as ever. It landed heavily on Yi Qian's shoulder. Chapter 1675. Major Xia, the all-round soldier king, took advantage of Yi Qian's staggering steps to grab her shoulder with one hand and lift his long leg. His hands and feet cooperated perfectly, and all of a sudden, Yi Qian fell into the snow again. After a bout of dizziness, Yi Qian, whose entire face was covered in snow, could be said to be in the most embarrassing state she had ever been in. It was also the most miserable time she had ever been in. In your current state, do you still have any way to escape from my hands? Are you trying to use your little tricks? Xia Jinyuan, who had thrown Yi Qian into the snow, looked at her coldly. He pursed his thin lips into a straight line and said, "On the battlefield of life and death, do you think your little tricks will work?" He was forcing her to realize the cruelty of war. He was forcing her to experience nirvana through her own blood and tears. Her nose was filled with snow. Yi Qian could only use her mouth to take in deep breaths. Other than enduring the pain in her chest, she could only endure it. It's useless. There's no such thing as little tricks on the battlefield. She answered him loudly. She forced her voice out her chest and through her throat. It tasted like blood as she answered him. Her answer was not the end. The torture continued. Sensing the hostility and anger emanating from him, Yi Qian knew that this time, Xia Jinyuan was determined to teach her a lesson. In the past, he had seriously and responsibly told her that they were lovers and comrades in arms. If she made a mistake one day, he would never show mercy to her just because she was his lover. On the contrary, he would only be stricter and harsher. If you want to become a real Special Forces soldier, you have to put in more sweat and tears than you can imagine. And the lesson you have learned and the blood you have shed is also more than you can imagine. Before Yi Qian had even entered the Snowfield Brigade, she had already tasted Xia Jinyuan's harsh punishment. You knowingly committed a crime. That's an even bigger crime. Xia Jinyuan shouted coldly. He pulled her up from the snow by the back of her collar. However, before he could do anything else, Yi Qian stood up and resisted again. She twisted her body to one side and grabbed his wrist that was holding her collar. She had realized her mistake and was being punished for it. She accepted it, but it did not mean that she would give up resisting. Right now, the two of them were on opposing sides. She lowered her head and used the flexibility of her waist to slip under Xia Jinyuan's wrist. Then, she twisted her body. In this way, it was Xia Jinyuan who tightened his grip. In order to prevent his arm from being twisted, he had no choice but to let go. Xia Jinyuan was so tenacious and strong that he was overjoyed. He knew that his little fox would not give up even in a desperate situation. As long as there was a chance to escape, she would grab it. She had made a mistake and deserved to be punished. He was more than willing to see how she would correct her mistake. "My lover, my comrade, I will watch you carry your gun and leave. I will also wait for your safe return. I will look forward to it and hope for you. I will wait for you to return covered in blood. I will wait for you to appear in my line of sight again covered in smoke. I will hold your hand again and hug you again." Xia Jinyuan watched as his lover struggled to escape from his hands again. A faint smile appeared on his thin lips. Xia Jinyuan, who had not used up too much of his energy, attacked more fiercely each time. In the end, he had one hand on the back of Yi Qian's neck and the other hand clasped Yi Qian's hand behind her back. He cruelly pressed Yi Qian's face against the cold and rough bark of the tree. Then it was the real end. Chapter 1676. Qing Niao, I told you very clearly that you would become our prisoner. He pressed his hand against the back of Yi Qian's neck and pressed his body against hers. His thin lips were close to Yi Qian's ear, and his voice was cold as he said, "Now, do you still want to run? Do you still have the strength to run? Do you still have the guts to use the same method you used on Baihe again?" The first part of his speech was all to pave the way. The most important part was the last sentence. Yi Qian struggled a few times, but was unable to break free. She didn't waste any more energy and calmly replied, "No, I already know that I was wrong. Qing Yao, you dare to use such petty tricks to deal with Baihe. You've disappointed too many people." Xia Jinyuan didn't loosen his grip, but instead pressed down harder on Yi Qian's neck. Fortunately, Yi Qian was wearing a helmet. Otherwise, his facial features would have been distorted by Xia Jinyuan's pressure. "Uncle Chun didn't teach you to do that. Uncle Jin didn't teach you to do that. I didn't do it. The army didn't do it. No one did it. And you could have won against Baihe, but you used such a method. Do you know that on a real battlefield, the enemy loves to send you to your death like this?" He was right. She could have won, but she used the stupidest method. This time, he was so ruthless to teach her a lesson. "Did I go easy on you just because I know you? Did I go easy on you just because of our identities? No, because I'm a soldier. As long as I'm standing on the battlefield, even if it's father, son, lover, friend, or brother, as long as we're on opposite sides, there's no such thing as mercy. I won't stop just because the other party is testing me. Qing Miao, remember your identity. You're a soldier." He lowered his voice and said each word clearly in her ear. Yi Qian, whose face was in pain from the abrasion of the tree bark, closed his eyes tightly and took deep breaths rhythmically. That's right, when one day the people who were most familiar with each other became enemies, there would be no mercy. There would only be a fight to the death. Yi Qian's chest heaved up and down rapidly as he gasped for air. The cold wind that poured into his dry throat was like a knife scraping through his eyes. His throat was tight with pain. He quietly listened to Yi Qian's lecture and humbly accepted such a strange criticism. "Bring out the ruthlessness you showed to your enemies." Major General Liu pressed down on the rim of the teacup with one hand. He used a little too much force, and the rim of the teacup was imprinted on his palm. Qing Yao's resistance is admirable. She persevered in spite of all setbacks, which is what a soldier should have. At this time, even the technical staff's gaze fell on the tenacious and unyielding slender figure. "Really good job. Soldiers should be like this." Yi Qian did not know that her resistance had once again won the favor of the high-ranking military officer. She was calculating the time quickly in her mind. Her body was captured, but that did not mean her brain was captured. It had been 38 minutes since she was discovered. The devil should be progressing smoothly. Unfortunately, she could not delay any longer. There was still some time before the end of the competition, and her physical strength was basically exhausted. For the time being, there was no way she could escape from Q King. If she did not want to become a captive, she could only rest and observe the situation. If there was a chance to escape, she would definitely seize it. "You're now a captive, Qing Yao. Enjoy the treatment of being a captive." After he finished lecturing, Xia Jinyuan used a rope to tie Yi Qian's hands from her shoulders to her wrists. He then tied it dead, not to prevent her from removing the rope and leaving. After he finished, he deliberately walked in front of her and turned on the searchlight on his helmet. Looking at the palm-sized face with bruises on the corners of her mouth, his slender fingers secretly clenched. Chapter 1677. Yi Qian also saw the man standing in front of him clearly. His face was also bruised. The corner of his mouth was bleeding from her attack, and the corners of his eyes were also bruised. Seeing him in this state, there was no doubt that he was in the same state. "Q King, are you planning to wait here for the higher-ups to finish?" Yi Qian looked at him and calmly reminded him. There's not much time left before the battle ends. Fortunately, he was still in good spirits after being beaten up like this. Xia Jinyuan slowly loosened his clenched fists. Then his thin lips curved slightly into a ferocious smile as he pushed Yi Qian out. His face was already so bruised and swollen. His body was probably even worse, especially since he had not held back at all when he kicked him. Not only was his face bruised and swollen, it was definitely purple. His heart ached. Of course it ached, but he had no other choice. She dared to risk her life. How could you be so reckless? She was so reckless. Training hard was not just for you to go into battle and kill the enemy. You had to come back safely. When the T6 combatant saw that Q King's aura was so low that it was almost at the point of explosion, he could not help but mutter in his heart. He had already caught him, so why was he still so low? He carefully went up to him. Can we go back now? The T6 combatant quickly glanced at the tied-up Qing Yao out of the corner of his eye and felt a little pain in his eyes. Qing Yao was so good at running. Qing Yao was so good at running. Qing Yao was so good at fighting. Something serious had almost happened just now. Fortunately, Q King had noticed it in advance. What do you think? Xia Jinyuan glanced at the T6 combatant fiercely. You've been out for 35 minutes. If you still don't come back, are you going to let the Devil King annihilate all of us? The original plan was to finish off Yi Qian within 30 minutes and then go back to support his teammates. But now, Xia Jinyuan narrowed his eyes slightly and glanced at Yi Qian. His handsome face was cold. Major Xia could not help but purse his lips again. This time, she wasn't angry because of Yi Qian's mistake. It was time to feel sorry for him. The Snowfield Brigade's wonderful captive plan ended. The Navy commander took off his hat, touched his head several times, and sighed. It's already very good. It's already very good to be able to hold on for 35 minutes. Fighting 1 against 3 and lasting for 35 minutes was the best a male soldier could do. That's right. There's still time before it's over. Although Qing Yao has been captured, she won't admit defeat. As long as she has the chance, she will definitely think of a way to escape. After the Major General finished speaking, he instructed his secretary, ask the accompanying military doctor to get ready. Once we're done, we'll immediately examine Qing Yao's body. Xia Jinyuan had never been merciful when teaching his soldiers a lesson. Now that Yi Qian had made such a serious mistake, he was even more merciless. The last few kicks were ruthless. Yi Qian's injuries were probably a little serious. The hunting operation was still ongoing. Li Jinyan looked at the time. 45 minutes had already passed. If Yi Qian had escaped, then Q King should have already returned. However, he hadn't returned yet. This meant that she had been captured. Contact them and exchange the captives. Li Jinyan pursed his thin lips and looked at the captured Snowfield Brigade member, codenamed Z7. His eyes were cold as he said calmly, 1 for 1. They had already lost contact with Qing Yao for 45 minutes. Q King had already taught her a lesson. Now that Qing Yao was his, how could he let her fall into Q King's hands? 1 for 1. The captive plan had ended in a draw. Z7 Han Zheng heard this and immediately said, Devil, you should just kill me. It was too embarrassing. Killing him directly was better than being a captive. Chapter 1678. His request was ignored. Li Jinyan gestured for his team members to tie him up tightly and wait until the end of the hunting operation before carrying out the captive exchange. At the military headquarters, Commander-in-Chief Xia had lost count of how many cups of water he had drunk. Whenever he saw his son beating up Yi Qian so viciously, his heart would pound so hard that he felt like he was going to have a heart attack. Ruthless, ruthless, too ruthless. With such a lesson, wasn't he afraid of scaring his wife away? The captive plan only required them to capture the target, not beat them up. Was this brat's head kicked by a donkey? Why was he so stupid? Commander-in-Chief Xia still did not know that Yi Qian had made a mistake. So when he saw Xia Jinyuan not only ganging up on Yi Qian, but also personally taking part in the fight with his fists and legs, he really wanted to pull out his gun and shoot him on behalf of his future daughter-in-law. This brat. Commander-in-Chief Xia cursed under his breath every time he took a sip of the strong tea. Since the country's top leader was still present, no matter how much he cursed in his heart, Commander-in-Chief Xia's expression remained stern and dignified on the surface. When the country's top leader saw how ruthless the male soldiers were and how tenacious the female soldiers were, He said to Commander-in-Chief Xia after the battle, "I'm very happy to have them in our troops. With such female soldiers in our troops, I can see hope for tomorrow. I'm afraid that the female soldier is injured. When the time comes, the military will have to call her and comfort her. Don't let her be traumatized. When the battle ends, the military will definitely send their condolences." Commander-in-Chief Xia replied with a serious expression. This was a must. That was his family Xia's future daughter-in-law. After being beaten up to this extent, he had to personally call her and comfort her. He also had to give Xia Jinyuan a harsh scolding. He wanted to beat Yi Qian up and make him run away. He was not done with him. The entire competition was nearing its end. In the snowy forest, the two teams began their final battle to the death. Yi Qian and Seven Han Jing did not participate in the battle, but as captives, the two of them were not content with their lot and were constantly thinking of ways to escape. Unfortunately, the guards were too strict. Until the end, the two of them did not manage to escape. It was Xia Jinyuan who gave Yi Qian his first captive. The speed at which the red and green dots representing the two teams disappeared increased in the latter half of the night. By the end of the battle, 12 of the 22 members of the Snowfield Brigade still remained, while the Storm Commandos only had 8. The result was obvious. The wireless communication was no longer divided into two groups, A and B, and Major General Liu did not wait for the kings of the two teams to meet and exchange prisoners. He directly cut into the channel and ordered Xia Jinyuan, "Bring Qing Yao to the command center for a physical examination." Family Xia was really ruthless at that time. Qing Yao must have been seriously injured. At this moment, Case 7, who was guarding Yi Qian, spoke into everyone's ears. "Qing Yao has a fever. She was given a strong antipyretic, but she's allergic to the medicine. There's a rash on her neck and wrist." The two teams' wireless stations went silent. Then, Major General Liu shouted, "What are you waiting for? Send her to the hospital." On the other side, Xia Jinyuan ran over like a whirlwind. "Bring her here, quick. Allergic to the antipyretic. This is going to be serious." Yi Qian did not know that she was allergic to the antipyretic. Before she took the medicine, K7 even specifically asked her if she had any history of allergies to drugs. She answered with certainty, no. She did not have any allergies in her previous life, but she really did not know that she would have any allergies in this life. She originally wanted to take 2 pills, but K7 said that it was not necessary, so she only took 1. Fortunately, she only took 1 pill. If she had taken 2 pills, she did not know what would have happened. Chapter 1679. Allergy to drugs was one of the most common symptoms. Yi Qian's flushed skin was one of the most common symptoms. In her previous life, she had taken antipyretics before, but there were no symptoms. Who knew that in this life? She had never thought that taking antipyretics would cause an allergic reaction. My head doesn't feel so good. Yi Qian, who was burning up, touched her forehead. She didn't wait for the military doctor to come over. She left K7 this sentence before she fell asleep. She didn't know what was happening in the outside world. K7 later recalled that his mind went blank for at least 3 seconds. He thought Yi Qian had gone into shock due to anaphylactic shock. K7, who had always been cold and aloof, who everyone in the team thought had transcended the mortal world and become immortal, panicked at this moment. Fortunately, he was mentally strong and didn't panic to the point of not knowing what to do. The first thing he did was to check Yi Jian's pupils and report Yi Jian's situation to the team. When a major general of the army and the navy commander heard that Yi Qian's condition was bad, they didn't just send the military doctor over. They immediately contacted the helicopter team to send Yi Qian to the hospital. The members of the Snowfield Brigade and Storm Commandos all had serious expressions on their faces. However, they couldn't all rush to Yi Qian's side. Li Jinyan led the team to the rendezvous point after the competition. Xia Jinyuan, who was running down the mountain, didn't even reach the bottom of the mountain when he saw the searchlights in front of him turn on. K7 was holding his head, and his hands were hanging limply. Yi Qian was running from bottom to top, stepping on the thick layer of snow. Yi Qian. This scene made the unyielding Special Forces soldier's eyes burst out in anger. His usual calm expression was like a complete piece of white paper that was suddenly torn in half. He was no longer the elegant and noble young major who always behaved elegantly. K7, who was running with all his might, heard a familiar voice from above that made him lose his cool. His tense expression relaxed a lot. The two of them were much faster. Then he saw the captain, who was usually calm and composed, suddenly stumble and roll all the way down from a high place. K7 pursed his lips. Now he knows how to be anxious. Why didn't he pay attention to Yi Qian's condition when they were fighting? Xia Jinyuan, whose knees were weak, rolled down the mountain in a way he had never done before. He only stopped when the impact slowed down a lot. At this time, Xia Jinyuan was in a mess. Covered in snow, he got up and jumped from the slope. He ran a few meters and stood in front of K7. Do you want to faint or sleep? Xia Jinyuan's voice. When he spoke, his voice was cold. Xia Jinyuan was Yi Qian. Was Yi Qian was Yes Yi was Yi Qianzi? K7 didn't immediately pass Yi Qian to him. Instead, he walked past him and reminded him coldly, pat off the snow on your body. His comrade's reaction made Xia Jinyuan calm down. He quickly patted off the snow on his body and put on his helmet. He rushed to K7's side and carefully carried Yi Qian. Xia Jinyuan lowered his head and saw her lifeless face. He then saw the bruises on the corners of her mouth. He pressed his lips even tighter. High fever, allergic reaction to drugs, flushed skin, shortness of breath. Preliminary diagnosis: skin allergy and respiratory allergy. K7 glanced at his captain coldly and said in a deep voice, Q King, you were really ruthless this time. You must have beaten her up a lot. Q King, the capture plan didn't say you had to be this ruthless. Even K7 felt that he had gone overboard. Chapter 1680. Xia Jinyuan focused all of his attention on Yi Qian. He carried her and rushed up the mountain again. He needed to reach the helicopter landing point and ensure that Yi Qian boarded the plane and went to the hospital for treatment as soon as possible. Xia Jinyuan did not tell all of his comrades about the mistake Qing Niao, Yi Qian, made. At that time, he said that his favorite thing was to catch a live Qing Niao. J5 guessed that Qing Niao might have done something wrong. Now, K7 did not understand Q King. J5's voice came from the earpiece. K7, Q King wouldn't punish Qing Niao for no reason. Ask him what happened later. It seemed that Qing Niao had been punished so badly by Q King that even K7 could not stand the sight of her. For a moment, J5 also had mixed feelings. How was this going to end? If he sent Qing Niao to the hospital, how was he going to face Qing Niao when she woke up? The members of the Snowfield Brigade fell silent because of J5's words. That's right. As the captain, Q King wouldn't punish Qing Niao for no reason. If any of his comrades had been punished by Q King, it must have been a fatal mistake. Then what fatal mistake did Qing Niao make? Everyone thought of this and looked at each other. Then their gazes fell on the other captain of the entire team. The devil should know the reason, right? Because the communication between the two teams was merged, the members of both teams could hear J5's words. Therefore, the comrades of the Storm Commandos all looked at the devil. They knew that Q King was not a cruel person. Just like the devil, there was a reason for everything he did. Then, why did Qing Niao get punished? This was the common question in the hearts of the 39 members of both teams. They did not get an answer even after Yi Qian was sent to the helicopter. Xia Jinyuan did not say anything, and Li Jinyan did not say anything either. There would be a summary meeting later, and any questions would be answered at that meeting. Major Xia, one of the parties involved, accompanied Yi Qian to the helicopter. In the cold cabin, the accompanying military doctor quickly performed a simple examination on Yi Qian. After removing Yi Qian's helmet, The military doctor could not help but gasp when he saw the bruises on Yi Qian's face that could not be covered. You beat him up like this. He's going to have a concussion. The military doctor couldn't help but grumble. He wanted to say a few more words, but the young major's cold gaze swept over him, and he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Xia Jinyuan seemed to have calmed down, but his fists were still clenched. When he saw that the military doctor was still in the mood to speak, his gaze turned cold. Please check the patient before you speak. There were soldiers who walked on the edge of life and death. They always understood when and what was the most important thing. Yi Qian was already in trouble. What he wanted was for the military doctor to take effective measures as soon as possible, not for him to be merciful. His fingers had been pressing on Yi Jian's carotid artery. His fingertips felt the pulse that represented life under the blood vessels, which made him feel at ease. K7 walked over and saw that Xia Jinyuan's eyes were red, and his hands. K7 frowned. He took out a first aid kit from his combat vest. He took out anti-inflammatory medicine, hemostatic powder, and disinfectant gauze. He said to Xia Jinyuan, "I'll hold her. You take care of your hands." Xia Jinyuan stared at the unconscious Yi Qian without even turning his head. No need. Chapter 1681. K7 was right. If he had been more careful, he would have noticed that something was wrong with Yi Qian, but he didn't. He didn't even think about the possibility of her being sick. From the beginning to the end, he had never thought about it. He should have thought about it. She was still on her period. A woman's body would be much weaker during her period. Plus, she was rolling around in the snow with a male soldier. She fought and ran. In the end, she was even surrounded by him. How could she have survived? At that moment, Xia Jinyuan didn't regret teaching Yi Qian a lesson. He just blamed himself for not being more careful. K7 saw that he was so stubborn and didn't try to persuade him anymore. His hand was injured when he carried Yi Qian on his back. He didn't wear combat gloves when he was boarding the plane. He was in a hurry and his palm was badly injured. It was fine if he didn't want to treat it. This kind of injury was nothing to them. The military doctor listened to Yi Qian's heartbeat and pupils. Then, he removed Yi Qian's combat vest, unbuttoned his combat uniform, and unbuttoned his windproof thermal jacket. He pulled the jacket up to his belly button and checked his back. Although there was a large area of redness, his breathing and heartbeat were still okay. His life was not in danger for the time being. His condition is still okay, the military doctor told Xia Jinyuan after the examination. But we can't rule out any unforeseen events. Xia Jinyuan looked at K7. He nodded slightly when he saw his comrade. Before he said anything, K7 said in a deep voice, "Skin allergic reaction can cause neurovascular edema. In serious cases, it can cause exfoliative dermatitis. She's still in a critical condition." K7 said in a deep voice. The military doctor couldn't help but look over. The military doctor was right. But why did it sound like he was trying to scare the young major? His breathing is a bit rapid. He might have asthma, alveolitis, pulmonary fibrosis, and damage to his nervous system. In serious cases, he might even die. The military doctor was very sure that the officer in charge of medical treatment was just trying to scare him. The female soldier's skin allergy was not wrong, but it was not as serious as he said. Moreover, the rash on the female soldier's neck was much fainter than before. It could be seen that the situation was stable and did not worsen, but it was not ruled out that there would be unforeseen events. He said that just now to scare the young major, because he felt that he was the one who had beaten the female soldier to such a state. After hearing what K7 said, Xia Jinyuan's heart felt like it was being hammered by an iron nail, so much so that his heart stopped beating. The temperature of his blood was still dropping. With the rumbling sound of the helicopter, it finally dropped to the freezing point. If something were to happen to his lover, his little fox, and his comrade, he would lose his life. Because Yi Qian was his life. The helicopter arrived at the tertiary hospital in a nearest city at the fastest speed. The hospital did not have a helipad, so Xia Jinyuan carried Yi Qian on his back again and tied him up with a rope. He carried the feverish Yi Qian down the swaying rope ladder step by step. The doctors in the hospital were already on standby. They placed the unconscious Yi Qian on a stretcher. Xia Jinyuan, who was running with the doctors, did not have any intention of stopping. He almost rushed into the emergency room along with the hospital. The nurse quickly blocked him. "You can't go in. You can only wait outside." Xia Jinyuan, who was breaking, watched the emergency room door close. He stood there as if his feet were rooted to the ground. He could not move even half a step. Chapter 1682. K7 caught up from behind and saw the figure that was usually as tall as a mountain and the lighthouse in the hearts of all his comrades. Now, he was standing so straight that a few nurses who passed by had to take a detour with a nervous look on their faces. "The resuscitation will take some time. Sit down for a while." K7 walked over and stood beside him. He looked at the red light above the resuscitation room and reminded him again, "Your hand were injured twice. If you don't treat them now, do you plan on touching Yi Qian's face with your blood again?" Xia Jinyuan raised his hand, looked at his palm, and finally moved. When he sat down on the cold plastic chair, he looked at K7 weakly. Under the light, his clear forehead was covered in sweat. He asked, "Are there any sequelae after the resuscitation?" "There are plenty." K7 kept his words short and simple as usual. He handed over the medical items in his hand. "Bandage them yourself." Let him worry a little more. Why did he hit her so hard? If he knew this would happen, why did he do it in the first place? Xia Jinyuan could tell that his comrade was not in a good mood. Coincidentally, he was the same. He took the medical items and did not ask any more questions. He was not even in the mood to talk. It did not matter if there were sequelae. He just wanted her to live well. He just wanted his life to live well. "Why did you beat her up?" K7 could not hold it in. He asked her angrily. "She was beaten up by you. What were you thinking?" What was he thinking? What was he thinking at that time? He thought of his comrades who had sacrificed themselves. He thought of his comrades who had never come back. He thought of his comrades whose bodies had not been found. That was what he was thinking. "Do you still remember R2? Xia Jinyuan's injured right hand was wrapped around his injured left hand. He looked down and said bitterly, "She followed in R2's footsteps. That's why I'm scared." R2's footsteps. K7's body trembled. His fingertips were already trembling slightly. In order to hide his attitude, K7 took the bandage from Xia Jinyuan's right hand and wrapped it around his left hand. He did not say another word. R2 was their comrade who had sacrificed himself overseas 2 years ago. He was not the one who had gone on that mission. He had requested to go. He said that the man used to be his best friend, and he wanted to personally take care of his best friend to give the country an explanation. He had died in the hands of a brother who used to be so close that he could trust each other with his back. News came back from the front line that before he sacrificed himself, he asked his best brother if he could turn back from the cliff and turn himself in if he died by his gun. The man said, "If he's dead, he'll definitely turn himself in." R2 tested his former brother and used his own life to test him. In the end, it was gone. He really lost his life in the test. The members of the Snowfield Brigade, who came up from the side door of the hospital and then took the fire escape stairs, immediately sensed the strange atmosphere. Xia Jinyuan, whose hands were bandaged, rested his head against the cold wall and expressionlessly closed his eyes. K7, who was sitting on the plastic chair opposite him, had his head lowered. Chang'e had no idea what he was thinking. The two of them didn't communicate, but the atmosphere between them was heavy and oppressive. What was going on? Could it be that he was Qing Yao? Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They quickened their steps and walked over with a cold aura. J5's expression was heavy. He asked in a low voice, "How's the situation?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.